And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister says the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Saturday, March the 5th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
Well, we're live across the whole of the UK on your TV and on your radio.
Coming up this morning, Boris Johnson warns of the risk of nuclear disaster in Europe following the Russian shelling of a Ukrainian power plant as the invasion now enters its 10th day. We'll bring you the latest on the crisis.
Ukraine's president furiously condemns NATO leaders for ruling out a no-fly zone over his country. Do you agree with Volodymyr Zelensky?
Meanwhile, the cricket world in mourning after the passing of one of the greatest cricketers of all time, Shane Warne. We'll look back at his life and how he's being remembered this morning.
Well, of course, you can join in anything that we're talking about this morning. Just drop us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GBNews.
The Prime Minister says the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime. In a video message on social media, Boris Johnson addressed the people of Ukraine and called Moscow's actions an abomination.
Global corporations are severing ties with Russia. Participation in sporting events is being cancelled, and nation after nation is taking a stand. The vice is tightening its grip, and it will continue to tighten.
Well, meanwhile, the mayor of Ukraine's port city of Mariupol is calling for a humanitarian corridor amid an ongoing blockade. The city's been under siege since Thursday, with power and water supplies cut off.
Well, earlier, President Volodymyr Zelensky furiously criticised NATO for refusing to implement a no-fly zone over the country after Russian troops attacked Europe's biggest nuclear power plant.
Today, there was a NATO summit, a weak summit, a confused summit, a summit where it was clear that not everyone considers the battle for Europe's freedom to be the #1 goal.
Well, of course, all of this has sparked a refugee crisis. The UN Security Council will meet on Monday as recent figures show more than 1 million refugees have now fled Ukraine into neighbouring countries since Russian forces first invaded.
In Poland alone, over 650,000 people are said to have entered the country. Our reporter, Paul Hawkins, is live there for us right now. Good morning, Paul. Hello, Paul. What's happening behind you at the moment? What's going on?
Yeah, very good morning to you, and morning, Stephen. Just to give you an idea of where we are, we are in Dorohusk on the Ukrainian-Polish border. It's about 330 miles west of Kyiv, and just to give you an idea of our surroundings at the moment, behind me, that's the Ukrainian side. That is where things start off quite quiet in the morning, and then we were here late last night, and this place was surrounded with people, with families, children, particularly men, particularly women, and I'll come to that in just a moment, coming through with children, and they were being over here is where they were being collected by various people. There were buses lined up all along the road, and various vehicles, and then people were standing here and then staring across the border waiting, and some of them have been waiting here for hours. In fact, there's one gentleman, don't know where he is right now, a Lithuanian guy that we were speaking to, lovely chap, and he'd driven all the way here to help his brother-in-law's friend, and he stayed in the car overnight, and his friend who went across the border to meet her husband and her kids, she couldn't get back because they were saying that the border was closed, so she's had to sleep in a car with the kids and her husband overnight. Her husband won't be able to come through because he is aged between 18 to 60, and if you're a Ukrainian guy and you get to the border and you're aged 18 to 60, they basically send you back to fight. They give you a piece of paper and then you have to enlist to fight. So anyone of that age is being sent back to fight, and mostly women and children coming through. In fact, according to the UN, 3/4 of the people that are crossing the border, not just at this crossing, this is one of 11 crossings between Poland and Ukraine, but the vast majority are women with children, and then after that you have foreign nationals, students at universities in places like Central Asia, from North Africa as well, they're coming through, and then you've also got double refugees, some people who fled war in places like Afghanistan, persecution in places like Iraq and Iran, etc. They then come to settle in Ukraine, and then they've had to flee war again, and they're what we call double refugees.
I mean, the people of Poland have been astonishingly generous, actually. They've welcomed people with open arms. But I just wonder how they feel themselves about almost bringing the war into their country. Is there fear?
A little bit of fear. There's a little bit of fear, a little bit of apprehension, because, of course, we are very close to Lviv in the west, and the Russians haven't approached the west yet. They've been attacking Ukraine from the south, from the east, and from the north. But at some point, they are going to turn their way towards Lviv, because this is really the western part of Ukraine. On the other side is really the only supply route in. So, from a tactical point of view, at some point, Vladimir Putin is going to turn his attention west. We're told it's quiet in Lviv over the border, but undoubtedly the Russians are coming, and when that happens, a lot more people are going to stream across the border, and the tension here is going to rise. We were talking about how much the Polish authorities are doing, and let's just quickly show you. There's a Polish humanitarian tent here. They're selling all sorts of, I say selling, they're giving away all sorts of things, you know, sweets here, you've got clothes over there in the corner, and then if we come over here, there's a kind of family area where like people can sit. You can see there's some families waiting there, and then if we walk down the road just here, there's someone giving away coffee and tea here. There's a little stall set up. This was full of people last night, and then you've got some portaloos that have sprung up by the side of the road, and then another humanitarian tent, and then some people here who've brought their camping equipment. Perhaps these people haven't had anyone to collect them at the border to take them anywhere, so they're just waiting for their applications to be processed by the authorities. So this all sprang up in a week, right? And the numbers at the moment from the Polish government, 672,500 coming across the border from Ukraine. Just to give you an idea of how big that figure is, that is half the number of people who applied for asylum in Europe during the 2015 refugee crisis, and we're 10 days into this conflict. So it is easily going to surpass that in the next week or so, especially as the Russians' shelling of Kyiv intensifies, and this is one of the main routes into Kiev, incidentally.
So what's going to happen, Paul, for the longer term? Because obviously there's been talk about bringing some refugees to the UK, but obviously with these numbers of people, they can't stay in Poland if this spreads out into a longer-term invasion.
No, absolutely. They're going to have to go somewhere, and Poland can't be expected to house all of them, and that is why there is some criticism of the government scheme that it needs to be opened up to Ukrainians who do not have any connection to the UK. At the moment, you have to have some sort of connection. You have to know someone, or be related to someone rather, who is living in the UK and Europe at the moment. They have agreed to take in millions and millions of Ukrainians for up to 3 years, visa-free. Some countries are enacting legislation to give them certain rights that will make them equivalent to EU citizens. So the scheme is much more generous in the EU than it is to the UK, and that's why the UK government's getting some criticism that it still isn't going far enough at the moment.
One of our viewers, Linda, hello Linda, has said, why is the world letting this horrible war continue? I can't believe how weak the world is. Every time I see the news, my heart aches for the people of Ukraine, and I have an overwhelming sense of loss and devastation. It is utterly staggering, isn't it, how quickly ordinary families become what we call refugees. Have you been struck when you've met them by just, they're like us. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, they were taking the children to school, they were booking a night out in a restaurant, and suddenly this has happened to them.
Yeah, I'll be honest, until you see it on the TV and you see the pictures and you hear about the stories, and those are heartbreaking enough, when you actually come here and you're standing here as we were late last night in the dark, it was well below freezing, there are crying children, there are people who've been waiting here for hours to be collected by someone, perhaps they're not going to be collected by anyone. They've clung on to wherever they live in Ukraine for as long as possible, and then they've just thought, right, that's it, either we live or we die, we're going to go, we have to take our family, we have to come to the border. And then of course the men in the family who are 18 to 16 years of age, they're turned back and they have to go back into Ukraine, so the families are split there. When you see that and you see the kids, it is absolutely heartbreaking. So I do understand where Linda is coming from.
OK. Paul, really good to see you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Of course, it highlights what Paul is pointing out there, highlights just how much money and essential supplies need to be donated now to just keep all of this going, to provide that help that people so desperately need. Well, one man who's doing his part is Dan Zenchuk, founder of Walk for Ukraine, travelling to 7 towns and cities to spell out Ukraine from the first letters of those towns' names. He joins us now. Morning to you. Look, this is quite an endeavour. Why did you want to get involved?
Sure. I mean, you've seen the news, you've seen the pictures there just on that previous report, and the support that's being given to the hundreds of thousands of refugees that are having to leave Ukraine. Of course, we've still got the thousands of our soldiers and volunteers that remain in some terrible and horrific conditions at the moment. We set up an appeal around a month ago now in anticipation of this escalation and events similar to this. So we're well prepared to very quickly be able to support where it's needed. My Walk for Ukraine is just my personal contribution. I'm a British-born Ukrainian. I've still got family in Ukraine. My grandparents moved here during the Second World War, again, as a result of Russian oppression and attacks on Ukraine. So it's something that runs back generations, and it's really sad we're here again in 2022 in this same position. But for us here in the UK, obviously we want to do as much as we can to help, and my walk is just one small part of everything that the Ukrainian community is doing right now.
You say it's one small part, but it's 152 miles, I think, over 6 days?
Yeah, that's correct. So the distances vary from 13 to 36 miles each day, 36 miles being the last day. So I didn't think that through very well, leaving myself the biggest challenge to the end. But, I'm so motivated to do it. There's obviously a lot of emotion, a lot of anger and a lot of frustration at the moment with Putin's actions and what we're seeing happening in Ukraine. And I'm sure that'll motivate me to get around.
Sure it will. Look, Dan, what do you make of the response that there's been here in the UK? And I don't mean from government or politicians, but from ordinary people.
It's been overwhelming, honestly. It's been fantastic. We've had all communities, not just the British public, but we've had other countries. You've seen here what Poland are doing, but the Polish community over here, the Lithuanian community, those that are going to be impacted also. Taking in our refugees, they've all approached us to offer help. I've had countless offers of free transport and warehousing to get this aid to where it needs to be. The pictures you see on the screen now, that's the Ukrainian community in Peterborough. They've had their own effort going on. this week, and loads of people have been turning up each day. They've had people turning up to volunteer to help pack items and get them out. The response has been absolutely fantastic. We've been so overwhelmed, and it's really united everybody from all nationalities and cultures to help Ukraine right now. It's been so pleasing to see for us.
So the towns and cities that you're going through spell out Ukraine, as we said. That's Uppingham, Kettering, Rugby, Ashby-de-la-Zouch, Ilkeston, Newark and Empingham. How much money have you raised so far?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so that's correct. So I think I passed through 5 counties over those 6 days, which sounds like quite a distance. So I've raised around £6,500 so far, which is already far exceeded what I could have imagined with this. I think I set my initial target as £2,000. Just to be at 6,500, still 3 weeks out from the walk itself, is a fantastic amount. I'm so grateful to everyone that's contributed so far.
Yeah, I'm sure that figure's going to go up as well. Look, good to talk to you. Dan Zenchuk from Walk for Ukraine. Best of luck with it.
Yeah, best of luck. Great stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
OK, let's take you through the headlines then this morning. And the Prime Minister says the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime.
In a video message on social media, Boris Johnson addressed the people of Ukraine and called Moscow's actions an abomination.
Well, President Zelensky is accusing NATO of weakness after it refused to implement a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky said people will die because of the West's inaction.
Sky News journalist Stuart Ramsey is said to be safe after being shot and wounded in Ukraine. That's as many media organisations, including the BBC, CNN and Bloomberg, have stopped operating in Russia. President Putin confirmed new legislation that makes independent reporting in the country a crime.
Well, meanwhile, Russia has blocked access to Facebook for its citizens. The state regulator says the social media platform has been taken down for its discrimination against Russian media.
And tributes are pouring in for the cricket star Shane Warne, who has died at the age of 52. The Australian leg spinner reportedly suffered a heart attack in Thailand.
It is such a shocker about Shane Warne. I mean, it's so sad. And especially when you look at his very last tweet, just sent yesterday, was paying tribute to someone else who died. And then just 12 hours later, the news comes out about him. It's unbelievable.
I mean, I don't really know very much about cricket at all, but I know Shane Warne. He's just one of those names that, where he was a superstar, wasn't he? He sort of transcended the world of sport to just be a global superstar. And I know that during his best times, England cricket fans absolutely, dreaded us ever coming up against him because he was legendary. He was brilliant. Yeah. And it's terrible that. And I knew him as well because he was a legendary good looker, wasn't he? He was a great looking person, and he had pizzazz. He had star quality.
He did have star quality.
And,
yeah. I mean, it's just so sad.
Can't believe
so
it, really.
sad. If you've got a sporting legend.
Who's yours?
Morning, yeah, get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Have you got one?
No.
No, not really.
No, well, I don't. I mean, I don't really know my sport, so I don't know who I'd.
See, I'd always say. Now, this ages me, I know, but I'd always say Billie Jean King. Number one.
Now,
yeah.
I've met her.
Have you?
I've met her in Downing Street.
In what?
In number 10.
What? You'll have to explain.
Yeah, no, I was invited to a function in number 10. It's about 10 years ago. David Cameron was PM at the time. And I got invited, and she was there, so I got to talk to her.
I was going to say, did you do the, oh, I'm a fan.
No.
I've been silly in front of people like that.
Have you?
Yeah, there are some heroes in the world that you go a bit doolally when you meet them.
Patrick Moore, I was a bit like that.
Yeah. Yes, he's wonderful. No, you see, I've met him many times, but I interviewed him. But Billie Jean King was, she wasn't, I mean, she was absolute magic to watch on court. She was just sort of a little dynamo. But she also did such a lot for women's rights and in sport and for equalling the whole tennis world for women. I mean, because in her day, the Wimbledon champion, if you were a woman, you got paid an absolute pittance compared with what the men get paid. She campaigned the world over for equality and that sort of thing. So, absolute hero of mine, Billie Jean King. But we wondered who your sporting hero was. It may well have been Shane Warne, in which case, give us your views. But if you can think of any other people that you grew up just admiring completely, or maybe they are the people who turned you on to sport. Or, yeah. Love to hear who your sporting hero is. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Do stay with us, though. We've got plenty more to come. We're going to take a look at the economic impact of the Ukraine invasion. First, though, let's have a look at the forecast for you.
Good morning. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weekend promises quite a bit of sunshine for many of us, but a fairly dull and damp, dismal day across eastern England today, mostly thanks to this rather stubborn weather front that's been with us for a number of days. But high pressure is building in elsewhere. It's led to a pretty cold start with a frost for Scotland, Northern Ireland. But equally, plenty of sunshine to come here through the day. Just one or two scattered showers across the far north. That weather front, though, making for a dull, dismal, damp day from parts of Yorkshire down to East Anglia and the south east, maybe at times also affecting the East Midlands. The West Midlands westwards, however, mostly dry and bright. Sunny skies for Wales, southwest England, northwest England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, with temperatures maybe getting up to double figures. Feeling cold, though, further east with the clouds sticking here. Temperatures only 6 degrees, say, in Hull, maybe squeaking up to 7 in Norwich. The patchy rain will continue here through this evening, but gradually start to drift a little further west. So we'll see maybe a bit of rain trickling towards Birmingham, maybe even Cardiff by morning time. For Scotland, Northern Ireland, again clear and again cold, -5, maybe as low as -6 in rural spots to start Sunday. The area of high pressure is well in control by Sunday. It's squeezed away that weather front finally, but it is allowing an easterly breeze to pick up across the south. So although it won't be as damp across East Anglia and the southeast on Sunday, still going to feel pretty chilly with that breeze. Maybe a few showers for Lincolnshire, the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England on Sunday, but they should be fizzling out. Again, plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland and much of Northern England. Again, after a frosty start, temperatures ticking up by the afternoon into the high single figures, 7, 8, 9 Celsius. But don't forget, across the south, although a little drier in the southeast, that wind will make it feel really quite cold tomorrow.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 6:22. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne across the UK on your TV, on your radio and worldwide on the internet.
Now, support for Ukraine continues to be felt right around the world as more Western companies stop their services in Russia. Singapore becomes the latest country to impose sanctions, and Samsung will suspend shipments. For the latest on this, business and finance broadcaster Michael Wilson joins us now. Hello, Michael.
Morning.
Hello. I gather that Samsung is the biggest distributor of mobile phones in Russia.
It is, and it's about the biggest distributor in the world as well. It suffered itself because of microchip problems, but it's joining a queue of companies who are actually saying we're not going to do business with Russia because of the Ukraine invasion. Now, the way to look at this, I think, is, yes, very laudatory that these companies are doing that kind of thing. It's good PR for them. But is it permanent or is it temporary? And I think a lot of the companies that are saying, you know, for the moment, we're going to do this. And also, it's very cynically worth looking at how much their business actually depends on Russia. Some of the luxury brands that have said overnight that they're not going to open their shops in Moscow and elsewhere in Russia. You know, you have to look at them and you think, yes, well, I get that. But what's going to happen when, as we all hope, this is over at some stage? Is this permanent or is this forever? And this is the way that business is looking at it right now, and that's the way you should look at it too. It's good PR for them not to do it. Good for Google, good for Apple, and all the rest of it. But how much? H&M, for example, which is the world's second largest retailer, announced it was not doing business with Russia for the moment. If you look at it, it's not a huge percentage of their sales to start with. So there are these little wrinkles that you should really look at before you're saying that, you know, the global corporates are saying no to Russia. It's really for how long and how much it actually means to them.
That's carrot and stick, isn't it, Michael? I mean, to the extent of, you know, they want to get trading back there, and the temptation of getting all these big companies back is maybe what's going to push people against President Putin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to look cynically at this. You know, some of the oligarchs that have been, you know, have been sanctioned. You have to say, well, where do they want to spend their billions? Is it in Russia? Or is it elsewhere in the world where things are, dare I say, slightly more luxurious, like the south of France and indeed like London? I mean, where are they going to spend their money? So is it likely that some of these oligarchs may be saying, actually, we're very rich, but we've got nowhere to spend the money, but absolutely boldly? I think that's certainly going to be a move. Again, I mean, you raised a very good point about public opinion. You actually hear what's going on in Russia. Where is the voice of public opinion? We see pictures of people on the streets. Now, we don't know whether that's actually happening now or happened last week or happened yesterday. You know, it's very, very difficult to get a firm idea of what's going on. And as Putin now closes the news outlets as far as internal Russia is concerned, all we can do is guess. I do know, and this is common knowledge, that the intelligence services are very frustrated by the very small circle of power that Putin has around him, which means that they're not getting any information at all.
Within all of this, Michael, whatever happens in terms of sanctions against whether government sanctions, international sanctions or individual companies, at the end of the day, it is all going to bounce back and hit us over here, isn't it, to an extent?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like we're going from one crisis to another, isn't it? Let me try and put some proportion on this. So if oil continues to be at this kind of $112, $113 a barrel, and energy costs therefore continue to rise, we could be looking at inflation of 10% by the end of the year. Now that's huge. I mean, it's not low now, but given that the Bank of England is looking at 7.25%, some city experts are looking at 7.5%. And now, given this, it's very, very difficult to extrapolate these figures. But this is the sort of estimates we're looking at now. If things continue as they are, then we could be looking at inflation of 10% by the end of the year. We could be looking at a £3 loaf of bread. We could be looking at a £7 pint of beer. The problem with agriculture in this country is it depends on fertilizer, and fertilizer is imported from Europe, and that is powered by Russian gas, and so it goes on. So no country is an island in all this, and it will affect us. And this is not to mention the rise in gas prices, the rise in electricity prices, household energy prices. The advice, such as it is do what you can to help yourself. I mean, we're going to hear a lot about the paucity of the energy industry in the United Kingdom. That business model, because of the failure of all the small companies that were attempting to compete with the larger ones, has completely failed. And there may be a new cap which could push energy bills up to £3,000 average energy bill. Imagine that. Imagine an average energy bill of £3,000 per household. That could be in place by the end of 2022. I'm sorry to give you all this bad news, but that's the kind of world that we live in right now.
Well, exactly. I mean, there's very little, I guess, we can do about it. This war has been forced on Ukraine.
Here are some things which could happen. Number one, everybody should insulate their homes as much as possible, because that is relatively low-cost thing to do. Down to the DIY store and get some loft insulation. Put jumpers on. Again, this sounds like very much grandmother kind of thing. Insulate windows and so on. Now, will there be an energy shift in this country? Will fracking suddenly become popular and economically viable and doable as far as legal things are concerned in this country? Everything else, solar, wind, nuclear, is so little at the moment, and that isn't going to develop to satisfy our energy needs overnight. But those are the kind of ways, if I were in charge of things, as it were, I'd be pushing for that very, very hard indeed, to stop this reliance on overseas sources, which, as we can see, just dry up if necessary. It's called weaponizing, and we don't like it.
As you said, I mean, everybody's business plan has been sort of turned upside down by this, but rethinking is obviously what we've got to do. Michael, thank you so much. It's good to talk to you, even though a lot of the news was pretty grim. Pretty grim. I had this argument, well, it wasn't an argument, a discussion yesterday with my son. I was in the house yesterday, and it was blinking cold because I'd done the sensible thing and turned the heating right down. He'd actually turned it off. And he was sitting there in his jumper or his laptop doing that. And I said, I'm cold. I'm so cold. I think we're going to have to turn the heating on. And the fact that this became a debate in our house, I don't think I've ever had to think like that before, but I thought it is the responsible thing to do, to turn the heating off.
It's just the way it's all going at the moment, isn't it? But we are going to feel the bite of this. But, you know, in terms of the sanctions and everything else, a lot of you get in touch and say it is just the right thing to do. We also get a lot of people saying, in fact, we had one earlier on, didn't we, Linda, saying, why is the world letting this horrible war continue? Couple of good points from Dave and from Jim. Dave says Ukraine is not part of NATO, so no chance for boots on the ground or planes in the sky. We can give them arms, but they have to use them. And Jim says, I don't like the idea of a no-fly zone. It will not end the conflict, but widen it. Yes. Russia and NATO air forces will clash. Well, that's right. I mean, that's the argument at the moment. It would, in effect, ties into a larger scale conflict.
But I was trying to make the point to Michael there that we have no choice in this. We've got to support Ukraine as much as we can. We are being dragged in it. We've got to sanction Moscow, haven't we? And if that means that it's going to bring repercussions back on us to our energy prices and all sorts of things, goods, £3 loaf of bread, what did he say?
£7 pint of beer.
Yeah, if it's going to... We haven't really got much of a choice, have we? I don't know. Let us know what you think. But I mean, we've just got to go here.
But what do we then do with the people, and many of them, who at the minute still can't afford food, can't afford to heat the houses?
Having just been through a pandemic again, in which we had very little choice, we had to take certain actions, which cost the government money. Have we just got to ask the government for more and more money again and make up our minds that the next 10 years or so is going to be really, really hard?
Oh, dear. It is depressing. Patterson. Morning, Patterson. I don't know if that's your first name or your surname. Ukraine not being a member of NATO is an excuse for NATO not getting involved in Ukraine, says Patterson. Not a reason. As long as we think Putin will press the button, he can do what he likes and NATO won't stop him. Other countries will suffer and NATO will be exposed as a benign club.
It's a debate worth having, isn't it? Gerald says Western governments and politicians should hang their heads in shame at the way they are handling the Ukraine invasion. By letting Putin take Crimea and taking no military action then, it's allowed him now to try and take Ukraine. Putin is a mad, brutal dictator who will not stop. Words and sanctions will not stop him. Eventually, the West will need to stand up to him militarily and should do so before it's too late.
Should we start referring to him as a dictator? I mean, what is he technically, an autocrat?
Yes.
Something like that. I mean, but
he's somebody who keeps winning elections for 20 years by being almost the only candidate.
Well, yes. All the opposition candidates are threatened or imprisoned or anything else. I mean, it's a very odd state of affairs.
I mean, I find it awkward calling him Putin and not calling him President Putin. But should we give him that sort of...
Well, I don't know. I don't have an issue calling him President Putin. Because
he is the president.
He is the president. Whether it's a legitimate thing or not is another discussion. We were talking about refugees earlier on, Paul Hawkins, on one of the crossing points with Poland. And we were, obviously, the Prime Minister's talked about people coming here, some criticism that we're not just letting anyone come. Peter says, I'm not sure that there is a big rush for the Ukrainian refugees to come to the UK. They have homes in their country. They left Ukraine because of war and want to keep safe. They'll be staying close in Poland, Romania and Moldova in the hope of returning to Ukraine when the war ends. But I think you're absolutely right. The problem is, when will it end? Depends how long it goes on for and if they've got homes to go back to.
And if they've got relatives in the UK, I think you wouldn't you, see it as the safest place probably to go and join your relatives until things calm down, hopefully. But a lot of families are leaving their men behind to fight and probably wouldn't want to move away very far. And of course, the hope must be that it will end soon and they will be able to go back to their homes. But on the other hand, it does look as though it's going to be a long, protracted business.
Well, we've got to have contingencies in place, haven't we, for looking after these people if it doesn't end soon. And that whole idea of trying to get across the border and if you're aged between 18 and 60, you're turned back. I mean, that's horrific.
I found horrific when Paul Hawkins was reporting for us earlier and pointing to the tents in the middle of the reservation, central reservation in the roadway. Those are families in there who haven't yet been processed. And like I was saying, that they're ordinary families. And a few weeks ago, they had their nice flats, their nice things, they had a nice house. And now they are reduced to staying in a tent in the middle of a road. Yeah. How quickly you become a refugee when you're actually just a family living in a war zone. It's just terrible. I totally get where Linda's coming from, is that you just can't bear hearing about it very much because it's just so awful.
It is that thing, though, isn't it? And I, again, totally understand your position, but the idea that if we get more involved, it will make things worse. That's the potential. It's stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Do get in touch with your views, please. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Up next, we're going to take you through the papers. We've got Ella Whelan and Jonathan Steele here with their take in a couple of minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.37, you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne across the UK on your TV and on your radio.
So let's have a quick look, shall we, at today's front pages. Well, the Times first. Welcome to hell, Russians. The Times front page denotes a message scrawled across a banner on a bridge in the Ukrainian president's hometown.
The Express has comments by Boris Johnson that weapons are on the way to Ukraine, but time is very, very tight.
The Mirror carries a wanted banner for Russian President Vladimir Putin. He should be tried for war crimes, says the paper.
The Guardian says the world narrowly avoided a catastrophe after Russia fired on a nuclear power plant, causing a major fire yesterday.
Telegraph. Boris Johnson warned that a radioactive cloud could threaten Europe if the West doesn't act following Russia's unprecedented assault on that nuclear power plant.
The Mail says the generosity of its readers, who've raised more than £3.5 million so far for the victims of the conflict, is quite outstanding.
And the Star marks the passing of Australian cricket star and all-round top bloke, Shane Warne, calling him simply the greatest.
The Sun also pays tribute to the colourful cricketing legend with the quote, "I smoked, I drank, I bowled a bit."
He was legendary, though, wasn't he? And it's terrible that he's died at just the age of 52.
52. Nothing
Heart
at all.
attack is what we're being told.
OK, let's go through the papers this morning in a bit more detail with columnist at Spiked Online, Ella Whelan, and former Moscow correspondent for The Guardian, Jonathan Steele. Good to see you both this morning. Jonathan, let's start with the Times, should we? Looking at a defiant Ukraine.
Yes, the Times have sent their star reporter, Anthony Lloyd, to the hometown of President Zelensky, called Freeview, and they point out how defiant the people are there, and they highlight this banner that's on a bridge in the town saying, "Welcome to hell, Russian occupier." And there's some dramatic quotes here from people saying that Zelensky's doing a fantastic job. One of them, the man who's in charge of the military defense of the town, says, "All of us here and all in Ukraine have rallied around Zelensky. He's a brave fighter who chose to stand among his people and unite them." Of course, he was a comedian and an actor before he became president, so it's a remarkable transformation since this terrible
But he
war
knows
started.
about communication, doesn't he?
He knows
You can
about
see it in every word he utters, and it stands the way he's appealing all the time to the people watching
Yes,
him.
and he's so busy. He's constantly on the phone to Western leaders too, asking for more help. In fact, he's blamed people for not having a no-fly zone above Ukraine.
What do you think of that? I mean, he's asking for
Well, I
something
think
that NATO feels it cannot deliver.
Well, it could lead us to a third world war, so it would be very reckless to have a no-fly zone. Because it would mean Western planes might be shooting down Russian planes, which is a declaration of war.
Meanwhile, Ella, in The Guardian, looking at this nuclear catastrophe that very nearly was.
Yes, we've been watching some very dramatic footage and pictures come out of the strike on the Zaporizhia compound, which is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. And though it's appalling that this happened and that the Russian military decided to attack this, it's very important to say that the fire happened at a training centre on the site's perimeter, and that not only is it under control, but their officials have said that there is no damage to the actual the scary nuclear aspect of it, and the radiation was normal. So in terms of any kind of leak or accident, that's fine. Having said that, the ramifications for this action will be continued to felt. The Russians now have control of that power plant, and indeed the response in the West is telling. So there was the US Embassy in Kyiv decided that it was going to come out and make a statement, and The Guardian reports attacking this as a war crime. Now, the US State Department back home decided to distance themselves from that comment, because when you start using words like war crime, and did you reported the headlines, the Mirror's got it on the front page, that makes it very difficult to enter into any kind of negotiation with, or the prospect of negotiation with Putin, if you're suggesting, as some of the papers are, that he should be put on trial, kind of Nuremberg style. It kind of eliminates the prospect that you might come together to some kind of compromise. So using that kind of, despite the fact that this was a terrifying attack that could have had very serious ramifications, using that kind of terminology and that kind of phrase is very dangerous at the moment.
Do we feel it's deliberate? Was it deliberate as a sort of an act to absolutely terrify the whole world, or was it somebody just messing up on the ground?
No, I think they wanted to get control of the nuclear power station. And
by launching a missile at it?
Well, the Ukrainian forces were in the power station, so it wasn't unguarded, and the Russians obviously wanted to get Ukrainians out, so they did use a missile.
So it was utterly reckless.
Yes, I mean, and
is that a war crime or not?
Well, the question, I mean, the question of the thing of war crimes is that you have the facts of whether or not something, you know, we have rules to differentiate whether or not something is a war crime. But that doesn't, you know, that's the kind of, those are the rules, and rules don't always apply when you're in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a war. And if the priority is to get to, you know, we know...
It is technically, though, a war crime, isn't it, to attack a nuclear plant?
Yes, but the differentiation here is that because it was a training centre, although I'm sure all of us can agree that doesn't necessarily wash in terms of danger. But I have to stress the fact that if the outcome of this for Ukraine to survive, because we know the weight in terms of military might is far in Russia's favour, if any kind of outcome other than complete destruction is going to be coming around the table, or some kind of compromise or some kind of negotiations, I think the West cavalierly kind of being able to indulge in discussions about war crime at this time is probably not doing Ukraine any favours.
No, possibly not. Jonathan, to the Mail, looking at the visa scheme we're looking at over here in the UK.
Yes, they have this slightly odd headline, kindness among the carnage. But what they're talking about are two things. One is the British new plan to give visas to people who've got family connections, Ukrainians who've got family connections in Britain. Originally, it was going to be for just 1 year they could stay here. Now they've increased it to 3. Of course, it's not as generous as anything being done by the EU, which is saying any refugee can come in, not just people with family connections. So there is a caveat, too, about this kindness among the carnage. But the other point they do make is about the British readers of the Mail who've stumped up and given so far more than £3 million to a special appeal that was run by the Daily Mail for victims of this war.
I mean, that's a good thing, but it doesn't stop the war, does it? I mean, that's got to be the answer. You were out in Russia reporting during the perestroika?
During the Mikhail Gorbachev period, when it was really hopeful and everybody thought that we'd have a new setup in Europe with no divisions and everybody would be in what Mikhail Gorbachev called a common European home.
Do you think the average Muscovite at the moment knows what's going on?
Well, they only have their own TV, and internet, which is used to be the kind of opposition to TV in many ways, has been shut down and impeded. And of course, they've now passed this terrible new law, which makes it possible to go to jail for 15 years for passing what is so-called fake news or false news to people. And in fact, as a result of that, the foreign companies, often journalists, are cutting out their reporting.
I was going to say, it's false news, but what the government decides is false news. So
the only little good thing about it does say with intent to supply false news. So journalists, in theory, let's see what happens in a court. In practice, in theory, journalists would say we weren't intent on putting false news. We thought it was the truth.
Well, yeah, but it's
try arguing that in a
Russian court, yeah. And the Guardian's got quite a lot on this, Ella.
Yes, so they report on the fact that they headline it with the fact that the BBC have had to not pull their journalists out of Russia. They're still staying there, hoping that something might change, but that they've had to suspend broadcasting on radio and television because of the fact of, as Jonathan mentions, this threat of 15 years in jail. I mean, it is notable that the Kremlin has accused the BBC of, as quotes here, playing a determined role in undermining the Russian stability and security. And Liz Truss is also quoted because she talked about the fact that the ban implemented on Russia Today and Sputnik, she argued that could have mirror effects in Russia, that if you took away access to Russia and Sputnik across the EU and in the UK, then Russia would reciprocate and ban the BBC. And in effect, this law does do it, although it has to be said that it's not just the BBC suffering, it's also Russian independent journalists who are having to close down their own stations. And, you know, if you have... if it's very hard to argue for bans on Russia Today and Sputnik, even though they are, you know, quite clear propaganda in terms of limiting the spread of fake news and dangerous information, when Putin is doing exactly the same thing. I mean, I think standing up for press freedom, even press and journalism that's quite clearly extremely biased and you could say strays into propaganda, is something that liberal democracies are supposed to do. And I think we know that throughout this war, access to information, whether it's heavily biased one way or not, is key. I think we need to know what's going on within Russia. We need to know what the Russian state is putting out, and just as much as Ukrainians need to know what's going on. I think limiting any kind of... Putin shows here that only fragile states who can't handle allowing their citizens to have access to all the information are the ones who put in place these extremely punitive laws. So standing up for press freedom is something that we can do in the West to be able to give an example of how liberal democracies are meant to run.
That's a really interesting point, actually. Really interesting point. Should we move on to something slightly different?
Talking of free speech, there will be a lot of people very pleased to hear that SAGE experts are being stood down, Jonathan.
Well, that assumes that everything SAGE says was wrong.
Well, there are a lot of people who think that, or think that they were
some of it was
unnecessarily
wrong.
harsh.
Well, the Daily Mail has a story saying, hallelujah, SAGE doommongers are stood down at last. And they give 3 cases where they allegedly say the SAGE people made terrible predictions about mass numbers of deaths and huge casualties figures from the epidemic, but in fact nothing like as bad as they said actually happened, so they're obviously very pleased that it's being shut down. But of course there are other scientific bodies still looking at the problem. It's not as though we've suddenly got no scientists or medics following the pandemic.
Does it feel as though the government is saying we just don't need your advice anymore, it's all over?
Well, they're saying we're now living with COVID, and so it's an epidemic, not a pandemic, and we don't need this constant daily sort of outpouring of warning of doom and gloom by the scientists, as they say.
Yeah, I'm almost
Does it make you uneasy?
I don't know if I'm comfortable with that or not.
The government has lots of advisors and gets lobbied on lots of different issues. But I think the problem with SAGE is that it moved from being, at times, it stepped away from being an independent body of advisors who were just kind of telling you what the science said, into playing quite a hectoring and political role in terms of pressuring and being utilised across the media as a means of pressuring government to take certain actions at times in the pandemic when it seemed unwarranted. So, of course, there were times when very serious action was necessary. There were also times, I think, when we went way overboard in terms of restricting people, arresting people for meeting up in park.
Meanwhile, we've just got a few seconds. What's happened to Partygate?
Well, what has happened to Partygate? I mean, that's what the Mail is asking. Having been served this questionnaire 3 weeks ago from the Met Police, Boris Johnson, nothing has happened. No fines have been issued. And it's, the question is, when world events happen, is the petty Partygate thing even an issue anymore? Or actually, has Boris Johnson been given a stay of execution? Or is it more important than ever to have a Prime Minister that doesn't lie in times of war?
Now is probably not the time to think about it,
yes.
I would imagine.
Most people would say that, yeah.
Yeah. Ella, Jonathan, thank you both. We'll catch up a little bit later on.
Now, as thousands of Ukrainian refugees flee to nearby countries, including Poland, Romania, Moldova, the United Nations warns this could be the biggest refugee crisis this century.
Well, let's talk to our reporter, Paul Hawkins, who's on the Polish-Ukrainian border. Morning, Paul.
Yeah, hi, Stephen. It's very quiet here on the border this morning, but it will get busy later. We were here late last night, and by the evening time, by the time it got really dark, this place was full of people waiting to meet Ukrainians who were coming through on the other side, and some Ukrainians coming through simply had nowhere to go. We've just seen over there a family, a mother with a couple of very young children come across the border. She was met by the volunteers here, the Polish volunteers, and given some aid. But we can speak to someone now who was waiting on the border till 3 a.m. last night. His name's Mikolo. He's a Ukrainian national, but you're living in Poland, Mikolo. And last night you met your gran and your sister coming across the border and other family members off the bus at 3 a.m. You were waiting here for a long time. How was it?
I was emotionally, but now I'm hope that everything is okay, they're secure. As a 50 kilometers from the Ukrainian, from Polish border, they're safe. But because last night for me it was terrible. I mean, like 2 days ago when my city Korostan and also Zhytomyr, it's the region of the Korostan, was under the attack. And I tell you, this school number 25 was totally destroyed by the Russians last night. Yeah.
Yeah. So just explain for us. Your dad was over here and your nephew was over here, and especially tell us about your grandmother, very special lady.
Yes, my granny, she's 86 years old, she's a nurse, but you know, for her it's the first time abroad in her life. And she's working like for 50 years experience on medicine and as a nurse, but now she was shocked because she's spending like about 13 hours on a bus, but maybe 6 or 7 hours on queue. It's more than the road from Korostan to there, and they spend on the queue to get to Poland, because we're now in the northern border checkpoint between Ukraine and Poland, 2 borders. It's the northern one, we call the Ukrainian side Yakotin and Storohusk. In the same place, 1 week ago, my 4 nephews, my father and mother, is also crossed this border last week, in the same place.
Yeah. So, and for your grandmother, how did she find it then? She hadn't been out of her town, she hadn't been out of her country, she's 86 years old. Was she reluctant to leave?
I don't know, actually. We hope we will back soon, and my granny hope to back soon to place the Korostan, because it's so important for her. It's emotional as well. But we will see what is going on. We hope and pray for a peace, as I tell the latest. Yes, we hope that everything will be good.
Yeah, and Korostan, just give us an update on what the situation is like there at the moment. It's about 100 miles from Kiev, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 150 kilometers from Kiev. It's just between Warsaw, on the road between Warsaw to Kiev, like from this. And Korostan, as I say, was under attack. Yesterday it was some alarm. Yesterday as well. But two of my sisters is now in Korostan. They doing a volunteering job. They preparing food for Ukrainian territorial defense for Ukrainian soldiers. And also 3 days ago, it was also under attack, and 4 soldiers was killed by the Russians as well in the Korostan.
Yeah, because Korostan it's a strategic hub, isn't it? A transport hub, and so it's a target for the Russians.
Yes, it's the main railway hub, because during World War II it was the same place. The Nazis, the Germans, they tried to destroy the Korostan railway, because it's launched almost all through Ukraine. It's important for Europe, for Ukraine. So important because in Korostan also it's just 70 kilometers from Belarus border. It's from this side is also can be under attack from Belarus side by Lukashenko government.
Yeah, and just very quickly, your grandmother, she's staying in a hotel with some other family members. But what's going to happen now in terms of settling in Poland more permanently?
I think they're gonna move to Warsaw today or tomorrow morning, because they need to relax for a few days. But hopefully they will be based in Warsaw, in the capital of Poland.
Yeah, and the thing is, thank you, Mikola. And the thing is, Anne and Stephen, we simply don't. They simply don't know how long that they are going to be in Poland for, like so many Ukrainians.
Yeah, no, indeed. Look, Paul, thanks for that. I mean, that is the issue, isn't it? I mean, people are, especially an older lady of 86, I mean, they're all having to move, and they just don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks or months now.
No, that's right. I mean, to hear him talk of his granny like that, it just brings it home that this is happening to real people. This isn't just statistics. This isn't just somebody's war game. This is happening to real people.
Certainly is. Look, we're going to continue to bring the latest on Russia's invasion of Ukraine in just a couple of moments. Stay with us.
Good morning. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weekend promises quite a bit of sunshine for many of us, but a fairly dull and damp, dismal day across eastern England today, mostly thanks to this rather stubborn weather front that's been with us for a number of days. But high pressure is building in elsewhere. It's led to a pretty cold start with a frost for Scotland, Northern Ireland. But equally, plenty of sunshine to come here through the day. Just 1 or 2 scattered showers across the far north. That weather front, though, making for a dull, dismal, damp day from parts of Yorkshire down to East Anglia and the southeast, maybe at times also affecting the East Midlands. The West Midlands westwards, however, mostly dry and bright. Sunny skies for Wales, southwest England, northwest England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, with temperatures maybe getting up to double figures. Feeling cold, though, further east with the clouds sticking here. Temperatures only 6 degrees, say, in Hull, maybe squeaking up to 7 in Norwich. The patchy rain will continue here through this evening, but gradually start to drift a little further west, so we'll see maybe a bit of rain trickling towards Birmingham, maybe even Cardiff by morning time. For Scotland, Northern Ireland, again clear and again cold, -5, maybe as low as -6 in rural spots to start Sunday. The area of high pressure is well in control by Sunday. It's squeezed away that weather front finally, but it is allowing an easterly breeze to pick up across the south. So although it won't be as damp across East Anglia and the southeast on Sunday, it's still going to feel pretty chilly with that breeze. Maybe a few showers for Lincolnshire, the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England on Sunday, but they should be fizzling out. Again, plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland and much of Northern England. Again, after a frosty start, temperatures ticking up by the afternoon into the high single figures, 7, 8, 9 Celsius. But don't forget, across the south, although a little drier in the southeast, that wind will make it feel really quite cold tomorrow.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister says the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 5th of March. Yes, it is Saturday. I had to check. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Dan.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV and on your radio.
Coming up this morning, Boris Johnson warns of the risk of nuclear disaster in Europe following the Russian shelling of Ukrainian power plant as the invasion enters now its 10th day. We'll be bringing you the latest on the crisis.
Well, Ukraine's president condemns NATO leaders for ruling out a no-fly zone over his country. Do you agree with Volodymyr Zelensky?
And as the humanitarian crisis worsens, our reporter Paul Hawkins is live at the Polish border.
Yeah, we are live at the Dorohozhsk crossing as thousands more Ukrainians continue to stream across the border into Poland. Coming up, we'll be speaking to a humanitarian worker.
Meanwhile, the cricket world is in mourning after the passing of one of the greatest cricketers of all time, Shane Warne. We'll look back at his life throughout the programme.
And of course, Shane Warne was a hero to many, but you've also been letting us know who your sporting heroes are this morning. We've got some amazing names, some of which you sort of forget over time, and then you suddenly realise people like Muhammad Ali, of course, is a sporting hero to so many. So keep those ideas coming in. We'll be talking about it a bit later on. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews.
So the Prime Minister says the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime. In a video message on social media, Boris Johnson addressed the people of Ukraine and called Moscow's actions an abomination.
Global corporations are severing ties with Russia. Participation in sporting events is being cancelled. And nation after nation is taking a stand. The vice is tightening its grip, and it will continue to tighten.
Yeah, meanwhile, the Russian Defence Ministry says its forces are entering a temporary ceasefire to ensure humanitarian corridors. It says they'll be open for residents of Mariupol and Volonovka from 7 a.m. UK time. Now, earlier, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky blamed NATO for refusing to help Kyiv protect its skies from Russian warplanes by implementing what he's called for from the beginning, a no-fly zone.
Today, there was a NATO summit, a weak summit, a confused summit, a summit where it was clear that not everyone considers the battle for Europe's freedom to be the #1 goal.
Well, the humanitarian crisis is getting worse. The UN Security Council are meeting on Monday. As figures show, more than 1 million people have now fled Ukraine into neighbouring countries since those Russian forces first invaded.
In Poland alone, over 650,000 people are said to have entered the country. And our reporter, as you saw there, Paul Hawkins, is live there for us now. What's the very latest situation happening there, Paul?
Yeah, if I just step out of shot, and Stephen, you can see at the moment it's fairly quiet. You can see some cars in the distance just coming through the border, but this is where throughout the day more and more people will stream across the border. They come across in buses, in vans, and many of them on foot, finishing the journey as they walk through. So a lot of them coming through. You can see over here, a family over here, mother and child have just come through. Of course, if you're Ukrainian and you're a man of fighting age 18 to 60, you're sent back into Ukraine. You're given a piece of paper and told that you have to go and enlist. So mostly, at least 3/4, according to the UN, of the people that are coming across the border are women with children. And of course, along here, as any of the 11 crossings between Poland and Ukraine, lots of humanitarian aid charities have started operating, giving out free food, giving out a lot of stuff here. We can speak to one of them now, actually. Magdalena, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, and just tell us your name.
Małgorzata.
And you've come from Warsaw to volunteer for the weekend here on the border. Yeah, why did you feel you needed to come?
So I have my friend who works for Polish Humanitarian Aid, and she asked me if I wanted to take part in this border to help the refugees. So I decided that it's a great opportunity, that I want to contribute and help the people.
Yeah.
So it's why I came here.
Yeah, what sort of stories have you been hearing about people coming across the border? I saw you helping a lady and her 2 children just now, a very young child. What did they tell you?
No, they were crying because the husband of the wife stayed somewhere and they couldn't find each other, so they were waiting for them, and there were different stories. The lady who didn't sleep for 8 days, and also another man who was waiting in the car for several days.
Really, for several days.
Yes,
well, and he'd come from Ukraine.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. So there's a lot of heartbreaking stories.
Yes,
and just talk us through some of the things that you've got here. Just show us a little bit what you've got for the people that are coming across the border.
We have different sandwiches. We have juices, water. We have also medical equipment, clothes. We have everything here.
Yeah, and this has come from donations from the people in Poland.
Yes, we have many donations right now across the country, and everybody wants to help the refugees.
Yeah, yeah. And there's still so they come here and you just try and find for them whatever they need, and then it's distributed accordingly. Yeah.
Even at night, the people were coming here every few minutes. There were a full bus of the people, and they were looking for some help.
Yeah, and I mean they're saying that at least 4 million Ukrainians could end up inside the EU. I imagine the situation here, especially when Russia starts to move on Lviv, it's going to get worse.
Yes, it's getting worse and worse, and people are very afraid. They are scared what's going on right now, and they are also very grateful for what we are doing here at the border. They start to cry.
And just finally, how do you feel? I mean, you live in Warsaw. That's not too far from the border here.
No, it was 3 hours by car.
Yeah.
But for example, on this park, you can see the people from across the Poland, from every city.
Yeah, they've come from all over Poland.
Yeah.
And how are Polish people feeling? How are you feeling about the Russians occupying Ukraine, about potentially being on your border? How do you feel about that?
Yes, it's a bit stressful for us as well, but we are trying to do our best, and we hope that this situation will not last for a long time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. Really appreciate it. Thank you. So many people like that volunteer have come from all over Poland, and we see what is happening in Ukraine, and you see sort of the bad side of humanity. When you come here, obviously it's heartbreaking seeing the people streaming across the border. It is also uplifting to see, the way that Poland has rallied towards the Ukrainians.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Paul, for now, thanks very much indeed. I mean, it's interesting, Anne, isn't it, how so many people here are trying to do things and to try and help. Well, if you are collecting food or donating food or whatever, I mean, that's one of the areas it could well end up. I mean, it is having a direct impact.
It is getting through to people, yeah. You wonder how it happens, how it works. If they arrive saying, we need this, we need that. How do you know what you need? Because you don't know how long you're going to be there for. And the rest of us sitting here watching it, you just feel so helpless, don't you?
I think that's the thing.
And that's why we are having so many people ringing in and emailing in saying, we should be doing more. There must be more we can do. But what?
Yes, it's very difficult, isn't it? But so that support for Ukraine really is felt around the world. More Western companies are now deciding to stop doing business in Russia. Let's talk to Professor Scott Lucas, who's Emeritus Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. Morning to you. In terms of the international action that is being taken at the moment, is that the right way forward? I mean, isolating Russia on the international stage?
Well, I think at the moment there are limits. And it hurts to say this because you want to stop this invasion, you want to stop the killing. But, for example, you can't put US troops, UK troops, European troops, troops of other countries into Ukraine, or else you risk this direct confrontation with Russia, which could escalate into the biggest war in Europe since 1945. At this point, and I stress at this point, imposing a no-fly zone, although I support it in principle, faces two problems. The first is that many of the Russian attacks right now aren't taking place from the air. They haven't unleashed their airplanes. They haven't unleashed their bombers. They've unleashed, as it were, missiles. They've unleashed artillery to hit Ukrainian cities. But secondly, a no-fly zone means, and you have to be honest about this, the risk, again, of a direct war if you shoot down Russian planes, which you have to do to enforce it. Short of that, I think the international community belatedly has done a lot to back Poland and to help it resist Russia. Inside Ukraine, we're talking about unprecedented levels of military equipment which have gone in, including from Germany. We talked about humanitarian aid, which your correspondent was talking about. That's also going inside Ukraine as well as into Poland. We're talking about economic assistance. And of course, the big thing to watch as we move into the next phase of this conflict is the economic pressure on Russia through the sanctions, with the Russian economy projected to fall 35% alone in the next 3 months.
Viewers, Richard says, I served in the Bosnian War under the United Nations. We stood between the Serbian army and the Bosnian civilians. Although we were very restricted to act, we were a barrier to most. Where is the United Nations? And why are we not putting in UN peacekeeping forces?
Great question, Richard. The starting point, of course, is that the Security Council is effectively paralyzed because of the way it's set up, which is the Russians can veto any resolution which would put in UN peacekeepers. And secondly, again, lightly armed UN peacekeepers versus the Russian armed forces, who are far more powerful than Serbia was 20 years ago, you've got a real problem being able to check anything that Russia wants to do. I do think the step to watch for, by the way, viewers keep an eye on this, is whether we now see some states moving to deliver jets to Ukraine. They haven't done so far, but it has been discussed. So the idea here is if we can't take on the Russians directly, we empower the Ukrainians to do so. And the longer this conflict goes on, the more the prospect of those jets being supplied to Ukraine increases.
That's going to give Russia the tool, at least the ability to lay the accusation that we are in fact getting involved in this war, isn't it?
Russia's going to accuse you of that, whatever you do. The fact of the matter is that we're at a point where Vladimir Putin, I think, has lost the information war. He lost the information war on day one of this invasion when he turned from being the supposed victim of the West, of NATO, of all these evil forces who don't like him, into the aggressor. And each day he's lost the battle more and more, because the fact is, you know that Ukraine is not on the offensive, it's on the defensive. You know that it's the Russians who threaten nuclear power plants, who have killed hundreds of civilians and will kill thousands more in the days to come. In other words, you know that if we provide those jets to Ukraine, we're helping out the good guys and not Vladimir Putin.
But whatever you say, however you argue it then, I mean, what you just said there suggests that the situation will only escalate.
I fear so, Anne, because when phase one of this operation failed, and phase one was to get into the Ukrainian cities like the capital Kiev and to detain or kill their leaders. When it failed, Vladimir Putin had two choices. Well, he had three. One is to back off, and to just back off and to take the territory he currently has in eastern Ukraine and say, we'll negotiate. That's not happening. Option two was to lay siege to the cities. So you don't level the cities, but you surround them, you cut off food, water, etc. That's not really happening except in the south of Ukraine because there are problems with Russia's ground forces. So option three, if you want to capture Kiev, you want to capture the second city, Kharkiv, now you take on the high cost. The high cost first and foremost for the Ukrainian people of leveling them, the way that you did in Chechnya and the way that you've done in Syria in the past 7 years.
Can I just finally ask one question that again has been put by one of our viewers? I mean, it's such a hard question, I almost don't like to ask it, but he says, it's Jeffrey, he says, is World War III a price humanity has to pay to rid the world of Putin?
Jeffrey, I'm not going into the bunkers yet, even as the Ukrainians go underground. It's not World War III because we have a different type of war that is taking place. This war is not large land forces across Europe. It's not air powers confronting themselves in the skies. It is the people of one country, Ukraine, who are facing an aggressor, Vladimir Putin, who shouldn't be compared to Hitler or Mussolini. Compare him just label him as Vladimir Putin, a mass murderer. So it is not World War III, but it is a humanitarian issue, which is each and every day we remember that the people who are first and foremost on this are the people of Ukraine, and I don't think we walk away from that.
OK, Professor Scott Lucas, really good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's bring you up to date with today's headlines. And Russia claims it will observe a ceasefire in 2 areas of Ukraine to allow civilians to evacuate. That's after Boris Johnson called Moscow's actions an abomination and said the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime.
Well, meanwhile, President Zelensky is accusing NATO of weakness after it refused to implement a no-fly zone over Ukraine. President Zelensky said people will die because of the West's inactions.
And meanwhile, Sky News journalist Stuart Ramsey is said to be safe after being shot and wounded in Ukraine. That's as many media organisations, including the BBC, CNN and Bloomberg, have stopped operating in Russia. President Putin confirmed new legislation that makes independent reporting in the country a crime.
PayPal is suspending all services in Russia. It's after the world's leading luxury brands also stopped sales in the country. Chanel, Hermes and Louis Vuitton have decided to temporarily shut shops in the country.
And meanwhile, Russia has blocked access to Facebook for its citizens. The state regulator says the social media platform has been taken down for its discrimination against Russian media.
Now, this morning, tributes are pouring in for cricket star Shane Warne, who's died at the age of 52. The Australian leg spinner reportedly had a heart attack in Thailand.
And Britain has won its first medal in the Winter Paralympics in Beijing. Skier Millie Knight and guide Brett Wild have won bronze in the women's visually impaired downhill.
Can we talk about the cold? Just to kick off.
Cold in here.
It's very cold in here, but nothing compared to what a lot of your houses are like this morning. Anne says, just listen to you talking about turning off the heating. Same here, sat watching you in my outdoor jacket and a blanket.
Do you know, that's what I did yesterday. I was so cold, and my heating, even when you turn it on, takes so long to warm up because it's underfloor heating. It takes a ridiculously long time to warm up. I was sitting there in my anorak. I thought, this is ridiculous. But there you go. Maybe it's not ridiculous. Actually, maybe it is the right thing to do.
Well, Josh says sitting in the... Just to quote you, sitting in the cold is not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I get you, Josh. I mean,
but we've all got to conserve energy now, haven't we?
But it shouldn't have to be an option, I think, is Josh's point. Totally with you on that one.
Chris says food waste should be looked at. 40% of all food is thrown away. I know it is a very, very high percentage. It probably is 40% of you. And this is a massive waste. I'm a farmer, and to think that this much is wasted is soul-destroying.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can see your point of view.
Yeah, and we've got to do our part with that as well, haven't we, in terms of freezing stuff and you know, not necessarily sticking to those best before dates. And
We've all got too used to it, haven't you? Going to the fridge and thinking, well, that's off. Or, you know, that's past its sell-by date. Chuck it all. We shouldn't be chucking food at all, should we? Especially when you look at what's happening in the Ukraine, where people are going to have to be given food and blankets and everything else. We shouldn't be wasting anything.
We've been talking about the cost that all the Ukraine sanctions and things are going to have here, because it is going to put up the price of just about everything, just the way the world economy works, and of course fuel being a key part of that. Archie says, because we were saying about, you know, we're going to have to pay the price here, but if you already can't afford anything, how do you do that?
How literally do you live?
Archie says nobody will be able to live on benefits or a pension and pay £250 a month if the costs for fuel reach £3,000 a year. I only put my heating on from 6 till 10 in the evening and then go to bed. The rest of the day I've got a blanket round me with a cat curled up at the bottom. This is not living.
It's not what we thought. It's not what we thought would happen in the 21st century, is it?
No.
I think by now we would have found a way, but we seem to be careering from crisis to crisis at the moment.
Yeah, and Sue says on Ukraine specifically, why is no one talking about 1994 when Ukraine was persuaded to give up nuclear arms by the USA and the UK, who said they would look after them? The whole Glasnost situation. And we did talk about this last Thursday, so just over a week ago, when we talked to a Ukrainian MP who raised that very point, Sue, and saying, you know, if Ukraine still had a nuclear arsenal,
would that make a difference?
Putin wouldn't have invaded. Well,
Are you
maybe
sure?
not. Well, who knows?
No.
But it may have made him think twice. But I don't know. But it's a point worth thinking about, and there's certainly a failure of the United States primarily under that, but also the UK and the West as a whole.
It may well be that better decisions could have been made years ago.
Yeah, and we didn't really live up to what we promised with Glasnost, did we? I mean, and one expert was talking
nor did Russia.
Well, no, but the argument is that I mean, not done out of spite, but out of ineptitude, that the West didn't really promise Russia what we said we would do. So, yeah, but it's a case of looking at all sides on this, isn't it, to see what triggered this. But that obviously provides no excuse to what Vladimir Putin has done as a result.
Well, coming up, Aidan's going to be here with your weekend sports update, and we've got lots and lots of your ideas for who is the ultimate sporting hero. That's coming up.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
$7:23, morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV and on your radio.
Time now for a look at the biggest sporting events taking place this weekend. There's plenty to talk about to do, and Aidan is here. Of course, sadly, the ultimate sporting story this morning is Shane Warne.
Yeah, this was absolutely horrendous, and I was sitting indoors yesterday afternoon. I just could barely believe that somebody I knew so well growing up, in terms of, seeing this person. If you're a person of a certain age, you don't remember decent England sides. You remember just England capitulating on a routinely on the way to school. You'd be in the car and you hear about another batting collapse, and Shane Warne was usually England's nemesis, alongside that wonderful golden generation of England, of Australian players, Ricky Ponting, Steve Waugh, Glenn McGrath. He popularised spin bowling as well. We were entering an era back in the late 80s, early 90s, when it was all about fast bowling. It was all televisual. It was just pace, pace, pace down the crease. And he came along with a bit more, a bit more of a sleight of hand about him. He used to toss the ball between his hands, and it was a kind of psychological battle that he kind of stared down the batsman. And England had some formidable batsmen, but they just...
It must have been awful facing him.
I know, he just had their... He wasn't the only one, but he had their number, and he'd spin the ball down, and it looked so good. And when you think of the ball of the century, I was talking to someone back here who works with us, Stephen. He was telling me that he was there in Old Trafford in 1993 when Shane Warne bowled the ball of the century. Now, I don't know if you've seen it. It almost defies physics. The ball's going out wide, looking as if it's, for all the world, as if it's heading somewhere towards the car park. It hits, it lands on the ground and just completely changes direction and knocks the stump. Now, initially, everybody's thinking, right, it's obviously hit a divot or it's hit a stone or something like that. And
That was the spin he'd put on the ball.
Absolutely, and you should see Mike Gatting's face. It's just, he looks bamboozled. And then it's only when it's in the early years of Jumbotron screens as well. Yeah. So it's when the crowd are actually able to get a proper second look at the delivery, and you hear the gasp. And don't forget, this is the Ashes. This is not something that England fans
is very important.
It's palatable to England fans seeing one of their batsmen being taken out. But they were aware in that ground that day that they'd witnessed something special. That was the start of Shane Warne.
But he's not just a cricketer, was he? I mean, he was a superstar in so many... He just had the X factor.
Oh, without doubt. I mean, I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, and the British public became more aware of kind of cultural life down in Australia. He was the embodiment of the bravado, the fly in the face of English imperialism, especially in the sport like cricket with its colonial past. You think of, like, in tennis, you had Pat Cash coming through, you had Pat Rafter coming through. In football, you had people like Mark Bosnich, you had David Campese in rugby, and of course, Shane Warne and his contemporaries, by the way, that golden generation of Australian cricket players really did make an indelible mark.
They all, yeah, it was very famous for at the beginning. Always had the streak
right.
of zinc cream down.
Well, he was the bloke. He looked like a surfer. He looked
had that look about it.
Yeah, he looked like a surfer, and he was one of those guys who he looked like he'd come out of the pub to go and play cricket.
Yeah.
And he wiped out. I mean, we look back. We all thought back then that the England team were just hopeless. The passage of time has shown us actually they weren't that bad. They were just up against absolute giants of the game, without question. Some of the greatest ever there, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, my own experience here, I didn't cover much cricket back in the day. Back in 2005, I was on agency, and I was in my 20s, and I asked him for an interview, and I was late. And that was the old me. Obviously, I'm always on time these days. Yeah, but back then I was late. I said, "Can I have an interview?" He goes, "Mate, I've got a dash." And I went, "OK, don't worry. I was just about to leave." He goes, "Are you not going to jump in the cab with me? And we're going to town. We're going to town and we'll do it in the back of the cab." And I was like, all right, yeah. I was worried about paying the fare. Luckily, he covered that for me, and I got a lovely interview with him. It went in the sun. It was great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Look, lots of people getting in touch this morning about their sporting heroes. And what you make of these, Aidan?
Yeah.
Bet says, Muhammad Ali, I don't really like boxing, but watching him move around the ring was magic.
See, I totally get that, because there are certain sporting stars that transcend the sport.
Indeed.
I mean, I wasn't into cricket, but I knew Shane Warne.
Yes.
And I wasn't not into boxing either, but who didn't know Muhammad Ali and admire what he did out of the ring as well.
Yeah, and some of those names that, again, he's forgotten about.
See, Alan says Bjorn Borg.
Yeah, Bjorn Borg.
Who would be your... Do you have a choice, you two?
Well, I was saying Billie Jean King has to be for me, because as a kid I used to watch her and all she did for women's sport and women's equal pay and all the rest of it. And she's still there at Wimbledon. I love to see her in the Royal Box every year. She still goes, brilliant.
Emlyn Hughes, I'd have to say, I think, thinking about it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Emlyn Hughes.
Crazy horse.
He was a great footballer, but I remember him more than anything else from Question of Sport.
Very funny.
And he was a good Barrow lad from Barrow.
Yeah, he was a very good talker on Question of Sport.
Was he not? Did he not? He failed to recognise Princess Anne on the picture board or something.
And then something like that.
And then they brought her in as a guest the following week.
Yeah. What about yours?
I would say Roger Federer, actually. I've interviewed him once. He was somebody... I mean, Gary Lineker made a good point recently. He said when he judges greatness, it's not necessarily always about the numbers and the trophies. Obviously, Federer's won the lot. He's won 20 Grand Slams, and he's up there with Djokovic and Nadal, obviously. But Gary Lineker made the point, and he used this when he was comparing Messi and Ronaldo. Sometimes it isn't about the stats. Sometimes it's about the joy you bring to people. Now, there's a reason Federer's made more money than everyone else, because everyone wants him at their event, because he plays a little bit better. He's a little bit easier on the eye, and what he represents as well. And he was always, fantastic to interview. He really was.
He's a mega star.
He didn't have time for. He didn't. He could have easily brushed off people like me and all the other people who wanted interviews with him. He always had time for all of us. He recognised...
He was always courteous, wasn't he?
He recognised he had a responsibility to the rest of his sport to make it great.
So Tojo says Lester Piggott.
Oh, gosh,
I'd forgotten about Lester Piggott, the greatest jockey ever.
No, I like this one. Robert says the most recognised sporting icon has to be Eddie the Eagle.
1988, wasn't it?
Yeah. Brilliant
He wasn't
movie
very
about him.
But he wasn't very good.
No, he wasn't.
No,
but
it was a film. He had a film made after him.
Yes,
so,
he
didn't
did.
do that badly.
But he still got... the whole country was behind him. It was...
So he was the Bristol carpenter, was he not, who did a ski jump and really badly, finished bottom, barely even scaled.
Yeah.
But it was about the Olympic ideal, wasn't it?
It was the fact that he was there, he got there, and we supported the underdog.
Exactly, yeah. He was the underdog by a considerable distance as well, I would suggest.
Wonderful names.
He had the bottle to do it.
He did.
Fair enough. Look, Aidan, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. But next, we're going to take you through the papers with Ella Whelan and Jonathan Steele.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 7:32, and whether you're listening to us on the radio or watching us on the TV, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning, journalist and columnist Ella Whelan and former Moscow correspondent for The Guardian, Jonathan Steele. Gosh, and there's a lot to talk about this morning. But Jonathan, if we look first at the Telegraph, it's very interesting that a former mayor of Chernobyl, I think, or the mayor of one particular town says we all remember Chernobyl.
He's the mayor of the town which is closest to the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. And he says we remember what happened at Chernobyl. He's actually handed out iodine pills to the people to protect them against any potential radiation.
But there is no sign that the radiation...
No, it's obviously a story that's going to be debated for endlessly in the next few days, how dangerous it really was. I mean, this man is saying it was pretty dangerous, that's why he's giving out the pills. On the other hand, he is pointing out, and the Daily Express has a good thing, pointing out that it's a very different kind of nuclear power plant from Chernobyl. It's much more modern. It's actually the biggest one in Europe. It is more modern. There's a containment building around this reactor, and inside that there's another containment area. So it's got two very thick walls around the actual reactors, so it's unlikely to get through. So
we can only hope and pray.
What worried me as well was the idea that the Ukrainian workers inside there would have, I mean, they did stay, we understand, and did their job at gunpoint at one point.
Well, they still are doing it now.
But if they are stopped from doing their job monitoring the nuclear reactors, then that too is dangerous.
Yes, but they're still working there now, and the crucial thing is there are diesel generators. So even if the electricity is cut off, the power that's needed to keep the cooling going of the reactors to prevent a meltdown is still there from diesel generators. So that's good.
Good. Well, it's something at least. To The Guardian, Ella, looking at the predicament for President Putin, he's in a corner, isn't he? And it's how someone in his state of mind and with his finger hovering over a nuclear button will respond.
Yes, I thought this was it's important occasionally to take a step back and look at, while we're all talking about the implications of sanctions or the prospect of no-fly zones and Western leaders deciding how they're going to intervene or if they're going to intervene. Action from the West can go both ways. So yes, pushing Putin into a corner can, the logic goes, can force him to rethink and back down, you would hope. On the other hand, the context in which The Guardian puts it in is that the Russian military has admitted that it has 500 soldiers of fatalities. Obviously, Ukrainians claim that that is a low number, that there's more. But the narrative coming out of the Russian state is continuously still that this is a special military operation. We know that lots of Russian soldiers don't have the full picture of what they're going into in Ukraine. They think that they're going in a kind of liberation exercise rather than an invasion and occupation. And so in terms of, in terms of Putin's willingness to back down, what The Guardian is saying is that it doesn't look hopeful, because any kind of compromise, particularly a military compromise, would be seen by him as a failure. But I just wanted to pull it out that they quote Lindsey Graham, who's the US Senator for South Carolina, who's made this, who tweeted suggesting whether or not there was a Brutus in Russia, that this idea that there needed to be someone who was going to wield the knife and that the only way that Putin would be brought down would be internally. I think that most people would probably suggest that being an autocrat for 22 years and how insulated Putin has made himself to be in the Kremlin, it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. And so it might be slightly wishful thinking to suggest that there is going to be some kind of a coup. However, I think what the West can do and what we can do is provide and express solidarity with those Russians who are opposing Putin's regime, not just the ones who are going out and risking their freedom by protesting on the streets, not just of Moscow, but across the country. But also, I think, by monitoring how we talk about Russians rather than Putin in the West, because any kind of the way that Putin's regime is playing off of anti-Western narrative is suggesting that the West is Russians' enemy.
Yeah.
We can be countering that by expressing international solidarity.
Countless people emailing in saying it's not about the Russian people. Most of the Russian people wouldn't want this. This is about Putin.
I just wanted, Jonathan, how much of is this does not go in the way, I mean, internationally that Russia wanted it to go? How much of a threat to Putin do the generals become, if any?
Well, it's a good point to what's going to happen, because I covered the Soviet Union as well as Russia. And the weird thing was, in the Soviet Union, it was at one level more democratic, because you had a real cabinet system. It was called the Politburo, and the leader, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, was subject to debates in the Politburo, whereas under Putin it's like a pyramid with just one man on top, nobody who's co-equal. And we remember Nikita Khrushchev, in the missile crisis of 1962. 2 years later, he was toppled by the Politburo. He went on holiday, they met, they agreed that they'd get rid of him, they summoned him back to Moscow and got rid of him.
But there's nobody like that
that now. Though it's possible, if this war really goes even more badly from the Russians than it is already, that in a few months' time, not immediately, the discontent will filter through and they'll topple Putin.
Or is that wishful thinking on our part?
Well, it's certainly wishful thinking, but it could happen, but not immediately.
Meanwhile, more weapons are on their way to Russia, do we think?
Well, there's an interesting interview with Boris Johnson in the Daily Express where the Prime Minister talks about more weapons going in. But actually what I found most interesting about the interview was where was the normal sort of boosterism, optimism of Boris Johnson. He sounds very depressed and pessimistic, saying we're just doing all the things you can imagine to try to keep the poor Ukrainians going any way we can. The situation is very, very bleak, I'm afraid to say. The Russian war machine is enormous, still encircling cities. What we're trying to do is keep getting some aid going through. So it's really quite a bleak assessment by the Prime Minister and not very optimistic as normal.
Yeah. And in the Times, Ella, I mean, with this very strange situation where we're all sort of celebrating, or sort of celebrating the fact that German pacifism seems to have ended. I mean, it was a real watershed moment when they started supplying weapons for the Ukrainian army. I mean, it's a very strange situation. We've spent decades being sort of quite content that Germany was in effect quite a sort of nation of pacifists, really.
Yeah, well, the two ways it's posed is critics of German pacifism say that it's been reliant on Russia for too long and cozied up to the Kremlin and all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, there is a political precedent for why Germany has held that position, and the fact that this has been overturned in a matter of hours, really days, within 24, 48 hours, is definitely something worth noting. And the Times here reports that the German broadcaster ARD did a poll that showed that support for military spending, for the action on blocking Nord Stream 2, and for expelling important Russian banks and the kind of Russian sanctions has risen among German population, so up in the kind of 67, 70%. But which, I think shows in part a change in the way in which a lot of Germans have felt very unhappy with Merkel for so long. You have Scholz coming in now and taking action. The question is it right to make such drastic change in such a small amount of time? There's a slight feverish atmosphere to the way in which lots of Western leaders are responding to this crisis, which is understandable because it's very hard to listen to Zelensky talk about the way in which his country is under siege. It's very difficult to watch what's happening to Ukrainians and not feel like that something must be done in capitals. However, there are reasons why international politics was the way it was in Europe. There are reasons why systems were put in place and rules were put in place. And it's not to say that they shouldn't change, and things do change in times of crisis. But you wonder about some of the more knee-jerk reaction to this and what ramifications they could have in the future.
It's a bit of sort of Pandora's box, isn't it? OK, look, Ella, Jonathan, for now, thanks very much. We'll catch up with you later.
Thank you. Now to a subject which will really interest you if you've ever been divorced, or certainly if you're contemplating divorce. Certainly something you need to know about. The government is introducing new rules to divorce which will actually make it easier to apply for a no-faults divorce. And that move will allow couples to end their marriage jointly and remove allegations about spousal conduct.
Now, there's concern that relatively little attention is paid to pension wealth during financial settlements, which may apparently negatively impact women.
Well, the former pensions minister, Sir Steve Webb, and current partner at LCP, who authored the research paper, joins us now. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Disproportionately, then, divorce can affect women worse because it's often the men who had the careers, who had a very good pension, and that's not taken into account?
Not sufficiently. So even before these big changes next month, what tends to happen at time of divorce is there's a lot of focus on the house. You know, you can see it, you need somewhere to live. Obviously, that's important. But what people miss is if you're in a long marriage, the most common outcome is that the husband has had the career, has had the big pension. The wife, you know, this is general, but it's very common, will have had a damaged pension, a low pension. She spent time out bringing up children. And when they come to split everything up, it's very easy to just say, well, pensions are complicated, I don't understand them, we'll forget them, when actually the husband's pension can be worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. And it's partly through his wife's work and bringing up the family, he's been able to have a career and build up the big pension. That should be factored in when they split up. And even under the current system, in most cases, it isn't.
I find that astonishing because no matter how bad the feelings are in the worst of divorces, usually I thought it came to a matter of sums, a matter of doing the maths. And that was all laid out on the table and sort of the start point was 50-50. Obviously gets negotiated either way. But you're telling me that pensions are not taken into account?
Not sufficiently. So I say even before these big, you know, half a century changes coming in next month, which perhaps we'll talk about in a moment. But currently, only 1 in 3 divorces has any formal financial settlement, financial court order, and not all of those include pensions. And partly that's because people just don't appreciate the value of a pension. You know, if you've worked, for example, in the public sector for 20, 25 years, your pension could easily be worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, but people don't grasp that that's the value of it. It's complicated, and getting it valued properly needs a professional. And I've spoken to people getting divorced who've just said, I just want it done with. I don't want anything to do with him or her. I want to start my life again. This is just going to protract things. I'll have half the house and I'll move on. And that may seem the right answer at the time, get things done. But when you retire 20 years later, divorced women, very high risk of poverty in retirement. That needs fixing at the time of the divorce.
What do we make of these changes when they come into force then? I mean, ultimately, it just seems to make divorce a lot easier.
There's a lot to be said for the changes, this move to no-fault divorce, because at the moment, one way of divorcing is being separated for 2 years with consent or 5 years without consent, or, as you said at the start, alleging adultery or something of that sort. If you've agreed or you want to end a marriage without having to make those sorts of allegations or wait years, this looks attractive. But the worry is, first of all, this is all digital. So you file for divorce on a website. You're required to serve notice on your other partner by email. That will do the job. So you can email them. You can even email them at work to tell them you filed for divorce. And within 6 months, it's all over. Now, you can try and get a financial settlement. You can still do that. That hasn't changed. But if all the emphasis is on speed and digital and just moving on, the risk is that anything that puts grit in the oyster that slows things down will just get even less attention than it does at the moment.
How can a pension, which is obviously something that is building up in somebody's account and won't pay out until a certain date anyway, how can that be sliced in two?
There are two main ways of doing it. I mean, so one is to simply say when that pension is paid, let's say half goes to the other party. So literally there are two half pensions paid, one to the husband, one to the wife or the ex-wife. The other is you put a value on it. And modern pensions are essentially pots of money anyway, but you put a value on it, and that goes in just in, you can't have half a house, can you? You can't have, but, you can value the pension pot and allocate half of it or a percentage to the other party. So pension sharing or pension splitting, various ways of doing it, but it has to be on the table. Otherwise, decades later, people do, I meet people all the time who regret not sorting it out at the time.
Would it be both pensions split?
Yes, so for example, it could be the wife was the main earner, so it's not always from husband to wife. The whole wealth goes into the equation, and they'll take account of things like the needs of children first of all, of who's put money into the marriage, but the time spent as enabling the other person to have a career. The couple probably planned that they would share the pension in retirement, living under the same roof. That was probably part of their financial plan. Now that they're not sitting under the same roof when they retire, it would be very unfair if one party then just never got a share of the pension.
Oh, well, it's interesting stuff. Steve, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
It's wise to be warned, isn't it?
It is.
It's something that you've got to take into account.
You see, should Anne, you get yourself a toy boy, then you'd end up sniggering at Stephanie Tetchy. Yeah. But if you got yourself a toy boy and then you split up, then you're not going to get half of his pension, are you? But he'll still get half of yours. So you'd lose out.
Well, that's why you sign a prenup. We don't have prenups in this country, do we?
No, you can have a prenup.
Oh, that would be good.
But I'm just trying to think of this thing.
I'd never sign a prenup.
Why, Stephen?
Why go into a marriage?
No, I know you're
and agree.
Rose-tinted glasses.
Well,
I'm sorry.
you're going into a marriage and agreeing what you would do if it fails.
You have to go.
No. I used to be optimistic like that, but I've just seen too many divorces in my time where I'm just like, and women do get the worst end of the stick in a divorce. So, as a woman, you have to protect yourself, I think.
I think either member of the marriage has to protect themselves. You do. I'm sorry, but you do have to think, what if the worst happened?
Oh, no, I don't agree with that at all.
Oh, you believe in love, Stephen.
I do believe in love.
I love that.
I'll look after your wealth for you.
Same here, Stephen. Put me and Anne in charge.
I'll do that for you, and then you won't have to worry. I'll sort it all out.
It'll be a very big job, I don't think. Anyway, as you can tell, Stephanie Tetchy is here for all the latest on the showbiz.
I love your jumper dress.
I know, pinky today, feeling pinky. It kind of feels like I'm wearing a onesie on TV, but no. I do love it.
Nice and chilled. Look, there's lots of sort of celebrities still really wanting to get involved in it. Well, not get involved, but voice their concerns about the Ukraine
Definitely. This week it's just been Russia's been effectively being cancelled in the arts, entertainment and culture sector. This week, Disney was the first Hollywood studio to come out and say that they will not be releasing any theatrical films in Russia at the moment. So this then led to Warner Media saying that they won't be releasing Batman there this week. And all these other studios have joined in and said we will not be releasing any films. And now from films to music now, we have musicians who've been pulling out their concerts. You've had The Killers, Franz Ferdinand, Iggy Pop. They're saying they're no longer going to be performing.
They were all going to play in Russia.
Yeah, they were all due to do concerts. So, it's not just only the sanctions that's been happening, it's all these artists, these film studios who've been taking a stand and saying we're not going to be supporting Russia with our music, with our films or with our art. Actress Mila Kunis, she was born in Ukraine. She's lived in America several years, but she's come out with her husband Ashton Kutcher and have said that they've set up a GoFundMe page and they're trying to raise £29 million, and they said that they're going to match up to £2.3 million. No, wait, I think it's £3 million actually, for every pound that is donated. So you've got all this money that has been donated. And I know last week, Anne, we were talking about whether the Queen would say anything. She hasn't said anything, but she's donated to the emergency, emergency committee relief. So they thanked her yesterday for making a generation to it.
I mean, I know a lot of people might say, "Oh, this is just show business. Who cares what these people think?" You know, not releasing Batman is hardly going to bring an end to the war. But it is all about a growing body of influence, isn't it?
Definitely, because it's like, you know, the Ukrainians have had their lives stripped back in an awful way. Entertainment compared to people being killed is a minor thing, but in Russia now, their life as they know it has changed overnight as well. So they can't hardly go about having a society with all these arts and entertainments being stripped away.
But it's interesting you say, well, why do we care about celebrities saying things? And I tend to agree with that to an extent, but it's when they do things, and you mentioned, obviously, Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher, but Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, they're putting their hands in their pocket
Also, they're matching pound for pound. They're saying that they're going to donate for every pound that's donated to a agency. I think it's
UNHCR.
They're going to be matching it as well.
That is
double.
Potentially an enormous amount of money.
It is, but that's how much money is going to be needed to bring Ukraine back onto its feet. And these celebrities have money, and even though it sounds big amounts, I hardly doubt it's putting a dent in their account.
Well, maybe.
No, but it's
nice
a growing pressure.
Yeah.
That has to help.
Yeah,
I mean, we've all got to do our bit, and that's them doing their bit, isn't it?
Definitely. Every little helps.
Talking of money... Oh, my God, Duchess of Sussex is getting sued.
Yeah, she's got new woes. Her half-sister, Samantha, has been a thorn in her side over the past couple of years. But now she's came out yesterday saying that she wants to sue the Duchess of Sussex for defamation because she's saying in all Meghan's big interviews, like with Oprah and with Ellen, she's made it out as if she's had this rags to royalty story. And Meghan's half-sister Samantha said that is not the case. You know, Meghan's tuition fees, all that stuff was paid off by her father. And she's saying that basically she feels that Meghan's comments about her and the family has affected her livelihood and her mental health and her emotional state.
Gosh, that's going to be a difficult one to
that's what Meghan's lawyers have come out with and said this is unnecessary. It's going to get minimal attention from the Duchess because it's not even worth it. So at the moment, Samantha's trying to sue the Duchess for £56,000 and she wants a trial by jury.
Well, she's not going to get that.
No, she's not. And I just feel like this is just another thing she's trying to do just to get more attention for herself. So last year, she came out with a book called The Diary of a Pushy Princess Sister.
Thought of a better time.
Yeah, and she's saying that because of what Meghan has said, it's affected her book sales and stuff like that. So, you know, you can see behind this story. It's just...
The lawyers will get rich and nobody else will, I think.
Definitely. It's just another way to make her stay relevant, and I just hope no media pays to do interviews with her to give her more airtime on this.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. Stephanie Tetchy.
Thank you.
In the pink. It's
in
a joy.
The pink. Always a pleasure.
We shall catch up with you a little bit later on.
Definitely
Thank you. Loads of you getting in touch this morning. Of course, as you always do. You always get in touch. We absolutely love it.
Oh, we love hearing from you. We really do. It makes us feel a little less lonely up here on our little plinth.
It does. There's obviously loads on the Ukraine situation. Rod, I think we mentioned Rod before, didn't we? I can understand NATO's stance on the no-fly zone, but Turkey, a NATO member, has sent drones in to attack Russian military, I understand. So why can't the rest of NATO do the same? Well, I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, Rod.
No,
and there are a lot of questions around all
There are a lot of questions. There were also questions about whether we send in planes, but not pilots, because if we sent in the pilots, that would be NATO fighting. If we delivered them planes, would Ukrainian pilots be able to fly those planes? As I understand it, they're very, very specialised, a lot of these planes, and you learn to fly on one particular plane. Doesn't mean you can fly any other particular.
No. Lawrence says, please remind me, was Kuwait a member of NATO when we sent in troops?
Kuwait had oil, didn't it?
Well, it's a very good point. Of course, Kuwait, Saddam didn't have nuclear weapons.
No. Things have changed, I suppose, haven't they? And this time we are up against somebody, are we, who is prepared to use nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Shirley says, owing to Russia having nuclear weapons, the West and other areas of the world dare not help physically. Therefore, Putin could continue pressing beyond Ukraine. Well, until he crosses into a NATO country.
And then we do
Shirley,
get involved,
then we
whether we
do
like
get
to or
involved.
not. Yeah. And that's what John says. Those people who advocate getting NATO or ourselves getting involved in the Ukrainian conflict have no idea what a nuclear war means. That is mutual destruction. Sorry. There would be no escape for anyone. It would be utterly horrendous.
Yeah, well, keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Paul Hawkins, our reporter, who's in Poland with the very latest on that Ukrainian situation, and particularly those refugees who are crossing the border.
Good morning. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weekend promises quite a bit of sunshine for many of us, but a fairly dull and damp, dismal day across eastern England today, mostly thanks to this rather stubborn weather front that's been with us for a number of days. But high pressure is building in elsewhere. It's led to a pretty cold start with a frost for Scotland, Northern Ireland. But equally, plenty of sunshine to come here through the day. Just one or two scattered showers across the far north. That weather front, though, making for a dull, dismal, damp day from parts of Yorkshire down to East Anglia and the southeast, maybe at times also affecting the East Midlands. The West Midlands westwards, however, mostly dry and bright. Sunny skies for Wales, southwest England, northwest England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, with temperatures maybe getting up to double figures. Feeling cold, though, further east with the clouds sticking here. Temperatures only 6 degrees, say, in Hull, maybe squeaking up to 7 in Norwich. The patchy rain will continue here through this evening, but gradually start to drift a little further west. So we'll see maybe a bit of rain trickling towards Birmingham, maybe even Cardiff by morning time. For Scotland, Northern Ireland, again clear and again cold, -5, maybe as low as -6 in rural spots to start Sunday. The area of high pressure is well in control by Sunday. It's squeezed away that weather front finally, but it is allowing an easterly breeze to pick up across the south. So although it won't be as damp across East Anglia and the southeast on Sunday, still going to feel pretty chilly with that breeze. Maybe a few showers for Lincolnshire, the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England on Sunday, but they should be fizzling out. Again, plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland and much of Northern England. Again, after a frosty start, temperatures ticking up by the afternoon into the high single figures, 7, 8, 9 Celsius. But don't forget, across the south, although a little drier in the southeast, that wind will make it feel really quite cold tomorrow.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Russia's military will observe a ceasefire in 2 parts of Ukraine to allow civilians to evacuate.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Saturday, March the 5th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, on your radio and online.
So, coming up this morning, the Russian Defence Ministry claims they've agreed the evacuation routes with opposition forces. Ukraine's Security Council had called on Russia to allow civilians to escape the fighting.
Ukraine's president condemns NATO leaders for ruling out a no-fly zone over his country. But what do you think of the views of Volodymyr Zelensky?
And meanwhile, back home, the Prime Minister says the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime as the UK bolstered its package of sanctions against the Kremlin.
Now, as the humanitarian crisis worsens, our reporter Paul Hawkins is at the Polish border.
Yeah, we're bringing you all the latest from the Dorohusk border, about 330 miles west of Kiev. We're speaking to humanitarian workers and Ukrainian refugees.
Meanwhile, the cricket world is in mourning after the passing of one of the greatest cricketers of all time, Shane Warne. We'll be looking back at his life throughout the programme.
Now, of course, Shane Warne was a hero to so many, but you've also been letting us know your sporting heroes this morning. We'll run through those a little bit later on, so keep them coming in by email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or send us a tweet at gbnews. So the Russian military will observe a ceasefire in the strategic port of Mariupol and the eastern town of Volnovakha to allow civilians to evacuate. That's according to state media this morning.
And elsewhere in the past hour, there have been reports of multiple explosions in the city of Kharkiv, and footage shows a large explosion in Irpin, near Kyiv, as Russian forces fight their way through the suburb to reach the capital.
Well, let's head back to Paul Hawkins, who's on the Polish-Ukrainian border, where, Paul, we know, we think anyway, more than 650,000 people have fled into Poland since this began 10 days ago, and that stream of people just continuing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, according to the latest figures from the Polish government, Stephen, 672,500 Ukrainians have now entered Poland since the conflict began. And to give you an idea of how big that figure is, you may remember the 2015 refugee crisis in Europe. That number, the number of Ukrainians that have passed into Poland already, that is half the number that applied for asylum across the whole of Europe in 2015. So we're very, very, very quickly heading towards the biggest refugee crisis that this continent has ever faced. Poland taking in the majority of the refugees from Ukraine. They're also heading towards Moldova, Hungary, Romania, but Poland taking the bulk of the refugees. And the UN estimates that that will rise. At the moment, it's just over 1 million. It will rise to 4 million, with 12 million internally displaced. So not leaving Ukraine, but staying within Ukraine, but still homeless. We can speak now to someone who has been waiting at the border all night. He's travelled all the way from Lithuania. His name is Arimas. Arimas, you've come all the way from Lithuania. We spoke to you here late last night, and you are waiting for your brother-in-law's friends to come back across the border with her children. They've spent the night there with their husband.
Can you repeat it, please? I just couldn't hear.
Sorry, because we were just drowned out a little bit there by the lady on the PA system. Just very quickly, just tell us why you're here.
I'm here to bring Ukrainian family to Lithuania. That are refugees. They ran away from Kiev, and mother and her three children. Their father have to stay here in Kiev for sure.
Yeah, and you were here. You came here late last night, and you thought it would merely be a case of collecting them and then collecting the children and then taking them back to Lithuania, but it didn't quite work out like that.
Well, the initial plan was to be in Lithuania by midnight yesterday night, but of course that didn't happen, and we expect them to be here in an hour now because everything looks like it's solved now, and they have a car and they are at the borderline.
Yeah, so your friend, she's going to be coming back across the border with her children, but they've had to say goodbye. This must have been very emotional to her husband.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's why we didn't want to rush them, and we were prepared to stay here longer, whatever it takes, just because we understand how difficult that might be, saying goodbye to your beloved ones.
Yeah, and it could have been their last night together. Is he going back? He's going back into Ukraine. Is that to fight?
Yeah. He has to. He's younger than 6 years old, so it's a must thing for them to stay here in Ukraine.
Yeah. And have you spoken to her this morning yet? Because we're still waiting for her to come back across the border with the kids. How's she feeling?
Well, I don't know how she's feeling, but we spoke with her. So she said that she will call us back when she crosses the border, and we'll see.
And Lithuania, I mean, just give our viewers in the UK an idea of just how far away Lithuania is from where we are now.
Lithuania is 500 kilometers from here, and we drew a little bit more far away, like 700 from capital city. But yeah, it's really close.
And a long way to come, because obviously most of the refugees are being rehomed given refuge in Poland, but also travelling very far to your country.
Yeah, like a lot of people are coming to our country too. Like all over Lithuania, we have groups on Facebook, a lot of stories on Instagram that you see people providing like shelter for people to come and live there.
I mean, why did you feel the need to help out yourself, watching what's happening on the TV? Just tell us a little bit about that.
So at first, I don't think that you need to help people. There is no like why me. It just we must do that. It's like people like us. They're our brothers, our sisters, families that are the same as we are. So, yeah.
Yeah, so no brainer. And in Lithuania, are they worried about the threat from Russia? Obviously, the Russians are in Ukraine and they're still dealing with Ukraine. But are they worried about the threat from Russia?
Of course, we are worried about Russia invading Lithuania too. I mean, all the Baltic states, right? But I mean, we feel maybe a little bit safer. At least we want to feel safer, just because we're in NATO, right? But I don't think that person who is in control of the situation on the other side of the border cares about that anymore.
You mean Vladimir Putin? Yeah. I mean, what do you think about Vladimir Putin, just quickly, if you can keep it clean?
I can't keep that clean, so I just shut up and don't tell anything about him.
Fair enough. Iris, thank you so much for speaking to us on GB News. Iris, like so many people coming to the border, and you will see the numbers increase throughout the day. They come here to collect loved ones and friends and take them back to rehome them, rehouse them wherever they can. But there are people coming across the border that simply don't have anywhere to go, and that is a big challenge for the authorities.
OK, Paul, for now, thank you. I'll catch up with you a little bit later on. And
that spoke volumes, didn't it?
Well, it didn't.
What do you think of Putin and keep it clean? Said I can't.
Yeah. Well, President Zelensky has accused NATO of weakness after it refused to implement a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Let's talk to Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer and NATO planner. Morning to you. It's good to talk to you. Look, we've heard from the MOD in the last sort of hour or so that the overall rate of Russian air and artillery strikes has gone down in the last 24 hours. Should we read anything into that?
Well, it's gone down, but it's still significant. The Russians are having problems across the board. The thing that I find interesting is them agreeing to these humanitarian corridors, because that, if you examine what they've done in other operations, does not bode well after those have closed. They did the same in Syria, backing Bashar al-Assad, and then went on to try and flatten the cities that they were in.
So, yes, so while on the face of it, it seems to be humanitarian and good news, it could well mean that things are going to get worse. And as you say, they could be seeking to flatten those cities?
Yes, it allows Russia to resupply its columns and its troops, and it's got clear problems with doing that. It allows it to get its artillery into position where it can then prosecute artillery and indirect fire operations into the city. And they can say that they've achieved the moral high ground by allowing the civilians to evacuate. Well, that's no moral high ground when they've invaded someone else's country.
Yeah, I mean, strategically, what is the advantage to Putin of flattening these major cities? Is there any advantage at all?
There's no advantage. Putin's caught in a dilemma at the moment. He was expecting this to be over within a couple of days, and it's not now. So he's now going back to his old playbook and what he's done everywhere else. So you look at what he did in Grozny in 2008, and he surrounded the city and flattened it. If you look at what he did supporting Bashar al-Assad in Syria, he's done the same. He's going back to his old playbooks again. And this is where the dilemma about the no-fly zone is fascinating. The difficulty is that at the moment, the war is confined within the geographic boundaries of Ukraine. As soon as we put a no-fly zone in, someone has to police it. The only organisation that's got the ability to police it is NATO. As soon as you put NATO aircraft flying in the same airspace to police Russian aircraft out of it, then the geographic boundary expands to the whole of NATO. That's World War III.
And yet, what can we do? If we can't do that, what can we do?
Well, I think we can redouble what we're doing at the moment. So providing as many weapon systems as possible into the Ukrainians. The anti-tank weapons, the anti-aircraft weapons that we're providing in at the moment are having fantastic effect, devastating effect on the Russians. Their casualties are going through the roof. The Ukrainians, a much smaller, weaker force on paper, but with a real resolve that shows the human element of it, are holding back the Russians. In military terms, they fixed them. The Russians haven't got the ability to maneuver, and they've stopped them achieving their objectives. The trouble is, historically, when the Russians don't get their objectives, they then start to go really nasty, and we're in for the long game. This is where the sanctions, the diplomacy, the political pressure comes in, because the only way this is going to resolve quickly, I believe, is if there's a palace coup in Moscow, and the pressure needs to be put on to those that are surrounding Putin. So someone or a group of them get together and go, enough's enough, get rid of him.
That's got to be military, hasn't it? Effectively encouraging a military coup, because we know that his circle of advisors and what have you is very, very small.
Well, it is a military coup or a political coup where they utilise the nastier side of the Russian criminal element. That's why there's pressure being put onto the oligarchs. The business across Russia and legitimate business and criminality, very often in many places the lines are blurred, and therefore the oligarchs have got access. Some of the oligarchs have got access to capabilities that you wouldn't expect normal business people to have access to. I'll say no more than that.
About the United Nations, we've had a lot of viewers writing in and saying, where is a United Nations peacekeeping force? Can't something be done?
Well, the trouble is, to put a United Nations peacekeeping force in, you need to get agreement from not just the United Nations General Assembly, but the United Nations Security Council. Russia has got a veto on that, so it can veto anything. So there'd be no legitimate basis to do it. And the United Nations, when it tends to go in whenever there's been a negotiated settlement between all of the sides, and it then goes in to police it. The UN doesn't really have the ability to go and enforce peace into somewhere. When it does that, it's the contributing members that do it. The contributing members that have got the ability to do that are US, UK, France, Germany. It's NATO again. And Putin's not going to accept a NATO-fronted United Nations, because he'll say that's just a guise for NATO coming and invading my country. There's unconfirmed reports coming out of Moscow today that the Russians are accusing what's going on in Ukraine as being a front for NATO attacking Russia, and this can only get worse.
Yeah. It does seem extraordinary, though, that we have a United Nations, and when one member state is the aggressor, the rest can't do anything about it.
That's the difficulty whenever the charters were set up, after the Second World War. And I think the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations raised a very interesting question the other day whenever he turned around and said, why was Russia given the automatic permanent seat on the Security Council whenever it was originally for the USSR? The USSR as an entity disappeared, and yet it was given to Russia without a vote. How can that be right, and how can that be legal? It would be sensible if there was a mechanism, and I don't know enough about the UN rules, regulations and the law that's surrounding it. It would be sensible if one of the seats on the United Nations Security Council became a rotating seat that the other members voted to put someone on there, so that we didn't have this automatic veto in the way that global politics has changed at the end of the Second World War, where we've now got US, France, UK, brackets NATO, China sitting out there, Russia sitting out there, brackets the two oppositions, and you're always going to get a veto on something controversial.
As you said,
it's a difficult thing. It is a difficult time. Some views on that have come through. We'll read those in a couple of minutes. But Philip Ingram, former military intelligence officer, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, so let's bring you up to date with the very latest headlines. And Russia claims it will observe a ceasefire in 2 areas of Ukraine to allow civilians to evacuate. That's after Boris Johnson called Moscow's actions an abomination and said the world is turning its back on Putin and his regime.
The Sky News journalist Stuart Ramsey is said to be safe after being shot and wounded in Ukraine. It says many media organisations, including the BBC, CNN and Bloomberg, have stopped operating in Russia. President Putin confirmed new legislation that makes independent reporting in the country a crime.
PayPal is suspending all services in Russia. It's after the world's leading luxury brands also stopped sales in the country. Chanel, Hermes and Louis Vuitton have decided to temporarily shut shops in the country.
Russia has blocked access to Facebook for its citizens. The state regulator says the social media platform has been taken down because of discrimination against Russian media.
And tributes are pouring in for the cricket star Shane Warne, who's died at the age of 52. The Australian leg spinner reportedly suffered a heart attack in Thailand.
Britain has won its first medal in the Winter Paralympics in Beijing. Skier Millie Knight and guide Brett Wild won bronze in the women's visually impaired downhill. So, said about comments about the UN. Morning to David, who's emailed in to say the UN should change to a majority vote system to prevent countries like Russia and its supporters blocking key proposals. And I think a lot of people, frankly, David, would look at that this morning and say, hey, you've come up with a pretty good idea there.
Yeah, because what is the point of having the United Nations?
If they can't do anything.
It can't do anything when one member is the aggressor in such an appalling way.
Graham says, what are the difficulties of kicking Russia out of the UN? After all, they have a record of vetoing just about everything and no doubt will continue to do so if they stay within the UN.
Yeah, we were talking about other things as well this morning, about the wastage of food. I mean, the fact is that we're all going to have to tighten our belts, turn our heating off and conserve energy and all sorts of things because not just the cost of living crisis that we know is going on at the moment, but if sanctions have an effect on us too, then we're all going to have to be more careful. And we were decrying the waste of food earlier. Jackie says, on the subject of wasted food, we assume the fruit and pastries on your desk are fake.
No.
They're not, but they get eaten, I have to tell you.
Yes.
They're not wasted.
No, there's a hungry lot behind us there. Yeah. So anything that is here does all get eaten. In fact, I had a banana last week.
Yes. Oh, good. I'm so pleased. Yeah. So they're not fake.
Week.
You
no,
can
very
personally
nice.
testament they're not fake.
And on the sort of cost of living situation, keeping warm and all the rest of it, electric blankets are a popular issue. Susan said she put hers on for 30 minutes when getting ready for bed, but horror, left it on all night.
And woke up very hot, I imagine.
Do they get very... I've never had an electric blanket.
Oh, they're wonderful things. Barry said, we took our electric blanket off our bed and went back to the good old hot water bottle. I have to say, electric blankets are good, but hot water bottles are lovely.
I do like a hot water bottle.
There's something very nice.
I might be a bit tempted. I remember the days when it's a bit warm outside and you sort of think, oh, it's nice to get into a cold, crisp sheets, but now...
No, it's not now.
I just want warmth.
Feet get cold. Bed socks as well are brilliant. But they are. Apparently you should look after your extremities if you feel very cold. Gloves, socks, hat.
See, I'm
but
one of these
it's true,
things,
it works.
I have to have my feet out of the bottom of the duvet.
Well, then your room must be warm.
Well, no, it's just I can't have them under the duvet. I don't know why, I just don't like it.
I think I know what you mean. It's a bit weird. But
So I couldn't wear bed socks. And what about sporting heroes?
Sian says, for me, the Pontypool front row. Or Sir Gareth Edwards. There you are. And Brian says, the late Jimmy Greaves, greatest footballer we ever had. I knew Jimmy very well.
Did you?
He used to come on
TVAM.
He used to come on TVAM and he used to do the television. Used to tell us what was coming up on the telly. But I knew him even better than that, going further back when I was at ATV in Birmingham, and he was sort of head of sport, or he was always in anyway. He had more caps than anyone else had for England, I think, at the time. I didn't even know what a cap for England was at the time, but there you go. But he was always in, and he was a lovely, kind, gentle man. Absolutely lovely man.
Isn't it funny? I do think it's very unfair when people like us get to meet people that other people worship, like you with Jimmy Greaves, not knowing what a cap was. I used to see, every Saturday morning, I used to see George Best.
Oh, why every Saturday morning?
In the makeup room, because he was doing a sporting show and we shared a makeup room, and I used to come off air and he was getting ready to go on air, and I used to see George Best every weekend. And I remember watching the Grand National with him one morning.
Well.
And I didn't think anything of it.
No, because you took it for granted.
Just took it for granted. It was George Best. He was a footballer, because I know nothing about football. And I just, when you think the people.
But he was more than a footballer, George Best. We've been talking about Shane Warne this morning, more than a cricketer.
Yes,
and George Best was more than a footballer. I mean, I know he was a legendary footballer. They say he was the best ever, although he used to argue with Jimmy Greaves about that. But I mean, he was a superstar, megastar, sex symbol, icon. He was everything, Georgie Best was.
A bit before my time, though, all of that.
All right.
There you go. Nigel Mansell says, Bob, still the only driver to hold the F1 and IndyCar championships simultaneously.
Is that right?
Yeah, Nigel Mansell, he always was. He was the name when I was growing up when it came to motorsport. He just talked about Mansell.
Yeah. Oh, right. Well, I certainly know the name.
Yeah.
But if I'd met him, I wouldn't have known, but there you go.
I think I've interviewed him.
Is it? It's absolutely terrible when you can't remember whether you've interviewed somebody. But I feel I'm the same on that sort of thing. Yeah.
So many. We get through a few between us.
We do. We're very privileged sometimes. It's wonderful.
We're very privileged to have you watching as well, this one. We love it to know. We know who you are, where you are, what you're doing. This morning, we can tell you, because of the wonderful state of technology, there are lots of you watching in Norfolk, in Glasgow, in Staffordshire, in Manchester, Leicester, Belfast, Blackpool, Slough,
Conway, Bridgend. So it's a good morning to everybody who's watching us, and do let us know where you are, and send us in an email or even a picture. It was lovely a couple of weeks ago when we had lots of pictures from people watching.
Yeah.
It's nice to see, you in your environment.
It is lovely. I know it's a bit tricky in a way to sort of bring them all to you when we've got all this very difficult news to go through, but if we can, we will try and squeeze in a bit of lighter stuff towards the back end of the hours. And of course, you could be watching anywhere in the world on YouTube if you are.
Love to hear your perspective on what we're talking about too. If you're watching from somewhere else in the world, what are you thinking as we do interviews about what's happening in Ukraine, and people are telling us their views about what we should be doing and why we're not doing this? It'd be lovely to hear your point of view too. So it's gbviews@gbnews.uk.
But 8:23, still to come for you this morning. Thousands are going to take to the streets today to protest over the cost of living crisis. Are you one of them? We'll talk to our East Midlands reporter in just a couple of minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 8:25. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the UK on both your TV and your radio and everywhere in the world if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
You could do a YouTube channel now because you've got that off to a T.
I don't know why.
They do. It's what they all do on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, serious matters, the cost of living crisis. We know it is expected to worsen, and it could get worse on top of everything else because of the situation in Ukraine.
Later today, protests are going to take place right around England, calling on the government to do more. So, Will Hollis joins us now. I think he's in a place in Nottingham where there is going to be one of these protests. Good morning, Will.
Good morning. Yes, it's something that we've been looking at on GB News throughout the last few months, this cost of living crisis, this ever-growing problem that's lingering around people's wallets and their purses, the money that they have to afford things like fuel and food, and it is making it a hell of a lot worse what's happening in Ukraine and with the Russian invasion. There's a couple of things that are well worth looking at the moment. Now, the first one is, of course, the cost of energy. While Britain only receives 5% of its gas from Russia, Russia does supply a lot of the European gas, the European countries with their gas and with their energy. So despite not being heavily reliant on Russian gas, it's actually Norwegian gas that us Brits make a lot of our energy supplies, get a lot of our energy supplies from. But it is going to be a bit of a ripple effect based on these sanctions and these prices changes that are going to be coming in because of the Ukrainian conflict. Now, the second one to look at very closely is the price of your food. Now, Ukraine is what's known as the breadbasket of Europe. It supplies 90% of the world with its sunflower oil, and it's a place where so much food, not only just for Europe and for Britain, it supplies so many places around the world as well as Russia. So there's a lot of concern as to how different types of food, particularly around wheat, grain and corn and all of the different oils that come from those sorts of foods might be supplied across the world, and how that kind of effect of prices around, not just in England but in the country, might affect what's going on in our wallets.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of concern, Will. Are you expecting Market Square there behind you to fill up later today?
Yeah, so this is Nottingham Old Market Square. Just around the corner behind me to the right is a place called Speaker's Corner, where a lot of the protests happen in Nottingham. It was only 2 weeks ago that I was last here covering a protest on a Saturday for the cost of living crisis. It's been organised by the People's Assembly, Nottingham People's Assembly, in line with all of these other protests that are happening around the country right now. And that was 2 weeks ago when we knew about what was happening on the Ukrainian border. There hadn't been an invasion at that point. And people were very upset about what was happening in the cost of living crisis. They were making calls to the government to do more, to do things like cut the VAT on fuel, look at green levies and how changing those, or at least reducing the amount that we pay for green levies, might help people's purses and their pockets. But now, 10 days into this Ukrainian conflict, I think the atmosphere today, just around the corner in Nottingham, when this protest happens, is going to be a little bit different, because people are looking more closely at what's happening in the Ukraine and with Russia's invasion of the sovereign nation that it is. And I think people are going to be a little bit more charged up, not just because of the prices that they think they might have to pay and the worries for what they might have to spend on things like fuel and food, but also supercharged by the fact that they're seeing something happen in Europe that hasn't happened on this kind of a scale since 1939, since the Second World War, and I think a lot of people are going to be really combining those two emotions of the real upset for war and the fear for what's going to happen to their prices. And it's all going to accumulate today in Nottingham around 1 o'clock, as well as in many other places around the country where thousands of people are expected to be marching to say we need to do more attention needs to be paid to this problem.
Okay.
And we can hear the bell striking behind you. It's 8:30 in the morning. Thanks very much, Will.
Yes, that's the bells in that's the council house.
That's the council. You know Nottingham well.
I do. I went to university at Nottingham.
Of course you did.
Trent, and then I worked there on Trent FM and Gem AM for a few years. And yes, I love Nottingham. I love Nottingham.
I was there. Central News East.
Oh, Central News East.
Yeah.
I didn't know you did Central News East.
No, well, we were never got going. Because of industrial disputes. Yes, late 70s, never really got going there. So we had to pack up our bags and go back to Birmingham. A couple of years later, it did get going in Central News East.
I used to operate the late night bulletins. I used to operate the subtitles that went out.
You operated subtitles?
Subtitles, yeah. I used to do that when I was a student.
Oh.
I used to get 20 quid a shift or something.
Oh, worth it then.
Which is a sore subject, actually, because I know a lot of people get in touch saying, why don't you have subtitles on GB News? So if you're one of those people, don't message me, because I don't have an answer. But bear in mind...
We'll have a word with the boss.
I think it's being looked at. I don't know how you do it.
I'm the same. I like watching telly with subtitles.
Do you?
Yeah. I don't know why, but particularly movies, because there's such a lot of mumbling in movies. I know, I'm sounding like oh, right, OK. But there is a lot of mumbling in movies.
My mum used to say I mumbled a lot.
No, you don't mumble.
Well, no, but she then had it looked at. She now has magical devices and I don't mumble anymore.
Really? You used to mumble?
I didn't mumble.
OK.
Just went a bit deaf.
I'll ask him in private.
Just went a bit deaf. It's the thing, people always say their mum, when you get older, you always say, oh, everyone's mumbling.
Yeah. And it's, well, do you think I'm a bit Mutt and Jeff?
Possibly.
Yeah, probably is that, actually.
Possibly. But I tell you what, in our line of work, wearing these earpieces all the time, I'm deaf in I am a bit deaf in one ear, because there is a little wearing.
I always wear my earpiece in that ear, and I'm as deaf as what's it in that ear, I know. And my children are always talking. It's noisy restaurants I find very difficult.
Oh, yes.
And I'm always going, what did you say? And they go, oh, never mind. Yeah. And that's the worst thing of all to say to anyone who's a little hard of hearing. If they say, what did you just say again? And you just say, oh, never mind, don't worry.
Yeah.
And you've been cut out of the conversation. Never do it.
And we was at the dinner, the RTS Awards last week, and it was very busy. I couldn't hear a thing.
I know. It's horrible.
And I wondered if that was because I was going a bit deaf. Oh, we're being told subtitles are coming. They are coming.
So they're working on it.
Don't know when, but it is coming for those of you who message about that. Soon.
No, you do that, don't you?
Soon.
In busy restaurants, you're always doing that. What did you say?
This divorce thing, right?
That was interesting. When you get divorced, whether you take into account your partner's pension pot.
Yeah. Look,
how is that divided?
John says, I divorced after 40 years and fit the description your contributor outlined earlier on. I had a public service pension. My wife got 52% of my pension pot, done on the basis that she was younger than me and would live longer. That doesn't strike me as fair.
Well, it would have been carved up like that for a reason. Somebody else says the no-fault divorce has been practised for many years. Yes, it has been in for a long time. I and my first wife divorced in 1986 due to irreconcilable differences. She wanted a career, I wanted children, so we agreed to part. Because there was no conflict, the same solicitor acted for both of us. That's in a no-conflict. Yeah, you can if you're two people who just want to divorce and there's no real big argument.
Sue says, my partner and I did not get married, and after 22 years together, caring for him in the last months of his life, I've lost about £800 a month as the pension instantly stopped. Admittedly, it was our choice, but it is and was his hard-earned money, which he wanted me to get half of. Just because we both made the decision not to get married, his pension has just disappeared.
Yes, and that can happen. That's why you need to take advice, really. Sometimes not getting married really is a problem. But equally, I know somebody whose husband died, and she therefore had part of his pension. And then she met another man she wanted to marry, but didn't.
Because she
would have lost the pension, and it was so valuable to her. So pensions are something that people don't think are important, but they can be worth a lot of money, particularly in your older years when you really want it.
I'm a big pension saver.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's good.
I just want to make sure that I'm all right in my old age, or older age.
Very first television job I got, my sister's mother-in-law took me to one side and she said, I know you're young and you won't even want to think about this, but start a pension now. And she was absolutely right, and I did. Yeah. If you can, even if you can't pay much money into it, it's still worth having.
As you say, it's not as much. It's not what you put in; it's how long you've been putting it in for. So even if it's just a couple of quid a week, if you've got a couple of quid a week, which a lot of people haven't got at the moment. Look, keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Coming up, we'll take you through the papers with Ella Whelan and Jonathan Steele.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
One of the joys of working here, I think, compared to other places where we may have worked, is that it's smaller and you get more interaction with management things. And I don't want to sound like I'm sucking.
Oh, you've got a private line to the
line to the boss. And yeah, I'm not trying to impress the boss, but he does listen and watch all the time. And so on the subtitles thing, this is from the boss. Subtitles are soon, weeks away. We're doing the final testing, and then they will be live 24 hours a day.
That's good.
On GB News.
That's really great.
So there you go. If you want a proper answer, you just ask the boss.
Meanwhile, can we say hello to people who are watching right now? Yes. Sarah and Gary in Spain. Hi there. Wayne in sunny Dublin.
Sunny Dublin, is it?
I wonder if it is. Debs in Exeter. Jamie in the New Forest in Southampton.
Lovely.
Lewis is watching us in bed with a cup of coffee.
Now that's the way, Lewis. You get my vote.
And Martin listens to us in Droitwich Spa in Worcestershire.
Oh,
glad to hear that you are listening to us too, because you can obviously listen and watch, or watch and then listen, because we're live across the UK on both your TV and your radio, so you can catch up with us.
I was listening to you in the car when I was driving to the hospital yesterday morning, listening to you and Eamon in the car, and it's just so great to think you don't have to leave it at home. When you leave the TV, you can just keep it going. It's absolutely blooming brilliant.
You've still got to talk me through how to do it on my
just
DAB.
sort the car out. It's dead easy.
Yeah.
It's dead easy. Just search for GB News Radio. Let's have a look at the newspapers for you this morning. We'll start with The Times. Welcome to hell, Russians. That's their front page, denoting a message scrawled across a banner on a bridge in the Ukrainian president's hometown.
The Mirror carries a wanted banner for Russian President Vladimir Putin. He should be tried for war crimes, says the paper.
The Guardian says the world narrowly avoided a catastrophe after Russia fired on a nuclear power plant, causing a major fire yesterday.
Boris Johnson warned that a radioactive cloud could threaten Europe if the West does not act following Russia's unprecedented assault on that nuclear power plant.
The Star marks the passing of Australian cricket legend and all-round top bloke Shane Warne, calling him the greatest.
And The Sun also pays tribute to the colourful cricketing legend with a quote from him: "I smoked, I drank, I bowled a bit."
Yeah, that sounds into it.
He bowled a lot, actually.
OK, let's go through the papers in a bit more detail with journalist Ella Whelan and former Moscow correspondent for The Guardian, Jonathan Steele. Good to see you both this morning. Ella, let's start with The Times, because they're looking at sort of emergency laws. We need to speed up sanctions from the UK.
Yes, so across this morning's programme, you've been talking about not just the sanctions, but what effect those sanctions will have domestically for people, whether it's cost of living, as your reporter from Nottingham was just talking about. And one of the things that the government is proposing is to change the law to institute emergency laws, an amendment to the Economic Crime Bill next week, which would make it easier and quicker for governments to take action in times like this, so either to impose sanctions or, in this change to the Economic Crime Bill, as the Times reports, to allow the UK to unilaterally mirror sanctions imposed by the EU and the US. Now, it quotes Boris Johnson saying part of the problem is that you say to a nation, or he says in the House of Commons, we want to take action. And then, as he says, you get hit by a brick wall of lawyers. He also says, none of us want to live in a country where the state can take your house off you without a very high burden of proof and due process, which it's difficult to make that argument at the time when the context of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. But it is true that, even though I'm going to sound awful now like I'm defending oligarchs, which I'm not, is that the precedent of a state being able to take away assets, whether it's yachts, whether it's houses, whether it's whatever, without due process, using emergency laws, I think is worrying, to say the least. We've seen the damage and the criticism the government has had for instituting emergency laws in the cavalier way it has done throughout the pandemic without parliamentary scrutiny. A Conservative government, and indeed backed by a Labour opposition, that feels so free and easy with instituting these kind of emergency laws, I think should give us pause.
Yeah, it's a very fair point. One I wouldn't have thought of myself, but you're right. It's again a bit like Pandora's box, isn't it? If we take the lid off, the
knee-jerk kind of. It's
when money wasn't dirty, or their ownership of certain buildings wasn't dirty a couple of weeks ago, and suddenly is now. Where does it stop? You have to ask, I suppose.
And in what future context could these emergency laws be used? Because we know that, particularly in British politics, it's not often that emergency laws are revoked. They often find a way of staying on the statute book.
Yes, but we can at least speak out against them. We can vote in a different government in a few years' time. You know, we still appear to have those rights, at least, don't we?
Yes, well, I'm certainly not comparing us to Putin's autocracy.
Meanwhile, Jonathan, how is President Putin feeling? He's a very vain man. He had a plan. Is it going according to plan?
Well, not according to the historian Simon Sharma in the Financial Times, because he goes back to Napoleon, pointing out that Napoleon once said that the army's success of a campaign depends only 1/4 on numbers and equipment, 3/4 on the morale of the soldiers. He's saying there's a huge difference between the morale of the Ukrainian defiant defenders and these poor Russian conscripts who didn't even know where they were going when they were sent across the border into Ukraine. And actually, Sharma says that Putin should have read Leo Tolstoy's famous epic, War and Peace, because he quotes the great hero of the book, Prince Andrei, as saying, success never depends on position, on equipment, or even on numbers, but on the feeling that is inside each soldier. Makes the same point.
Yeah, well, it's a valid point, isn't it? But I mean, you can't help feel a little bit sorry for some of these very young Russian soldiers who have no idea what they're going into, and they've been told such lies about what they're doing.
Yes, and the shock must be incredible, because they thought they were on a training exercise. You know, they've been some months on the border. They thought there was training exercise. Obviously, their lives were not at risk. Suddenly, they're in a shooting war.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some pictures, weren't there, earlier in the week of a couple of young conscripts, at least. Once they realised what was happening, all they wanted to do was grab a mobile phone and call their mums.
Well, I mean, the Ukrainians have been commendable for a number of reasons, not least their bravery, but also because there's been footage of them taking Russian soldiers who've been captured and allowing them to call their mothers, lots of them who didn't know what, as Jonathan describes, didn't know the nature of the mission that they were being sent on, and also haven't been in contact with their families for an extremely long time. And the soldiers breaking down, crying, and having a cup of tea. And it sounds kind of cliche, but actually I think
it's heartbreaking.
That solidarity between Russians and Ukrainians who oppose this regime is very important, because Putin always wields the fact that he's trying to profit off the idea that Ukrainians and Russians are the same people. That's his defence against attacking sovereignty. But actually, it is the case that there is huge amounts of solidarity between those two nations, because people are related even by bloodlines or by in
That's
kind of
what's so
sentiment
disgusting
and culture.
about war, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's human beings being asked to shoot each other, and in most cases, they would never choose to do that.
Yeah, it's horrifying. Look, to the Mail, Ella, looking at how, in many ways, the world has changed.
Yeah, this is Andrew Neil's column, and he's looking at a number of things. He's very. He praises Boris Johnson for being sort of statesmanlike and handling this well. He also talks a little bit about what's the changes that we mentioned in Germany in relation to Greens suddenly now embracing nuclear. But I just wanted to pick out one thing that he says. He finishes by saying, now Britain stands tall. America is a reliable ally once more. The EU has found new purpose. NATO is more united than ever, and Germany has rediscovered its backbone. And he's really putting forward this idea that the unintended consequences of Putin's actions is that he's reunified the West. Now, I don't know that I agree with Neil. I think that's probably looking at the situation rose-tinted glasses. But it opens up the question of what the future, but beyond the current crisis of what's going on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, what the future for geopolitics will be. Because if you do end up having a intensely unified West around NATO, and you have a remaining position that Russia remains in terms of an anti-West position, then conflicts like we're seeing in Ukraine aren't off the table for the future. A reunification of Western interests isn't necessarily the positive thing that I think Andrew Neil is putting it forward as. It poses questions for the future of geopolitics.
Yes, I find the view quite interesting, surprising, because so many people are emailing us saying, hang on a minute, NATO is almost standing there helpless. United Nations doing nothing because it can't do anything. And it just seems that all of the building blocks since World War II that we had built, hopefully to help us against a situation like this, is happening anyway. They're not doing anything.
Jonathan, to Partygate, this is in the Mail as well. I mean, it's died a death, hasn't it?
Yes, it's a good idea of the Daily Mail to remind us that this probe is still going on into what happened in these parties. People have almost forgotten about it. The Mail points out that no fines have been dished out to anybody yet for breaching the law. Questionnaires are still being sent out by the Met to people to say what they were doing on that day, at this day or the other day. And, why are they taking so long?
Do we care anymore? I mean,
I think
with all this going on, do we care anymore?
This obviously plays into Boris Johnson's hands. People are forgetting about it. This big crisis has overtaken it. Johnson himself says he's looking forward to an early end to all this so he can put forward his own side of the story. Well, he's already done that in the questionnaires, which he's returned to the Met, but we don't know what he actually said.
I mean, but we're in a situation now where if the Met was acting fast on this, and should he get a fine, he would... The pressure would be insurmountable for him to resign.
But he claims he won't resign, even if he's found.
Now's not the time, is it, for a change at the top?
Well, you could say that, but there wouldn't be a change immediately. He would have to resign as leader of Prime Minister. He would remain there. There'd be an acting Prime Minister, and there wouldn't be actually a change of new leadership until the Tory party has voted no confidence and chosen a successor.
We need stability, though, don't we, at the moment, in order to stand firm?
Well, yeah.
Very difficult to know. I think we've run out of time there on the newspapers, have we? We have. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Ella and Jonathan.
Good to see you this morning.
Meanwhile, as the conflict in Ukraine rages on, many people across the world have been protesting in solidarity against the war.
Yes, Polina Merkulova is from Moscow and has lived in Leeds for more than 6 years. She blames the Russian president for Russians being punished for his actions.
Our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley has her story.
I'm here with Polina. She's Russian. She was born in Moscow and she came to Leeds 6 years ago to study at the university. She's strongly opposed to the war in Ukraine at the moment, and she's been on a march to stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Polina, can you just tell me, what do you think to this current war at the moment?
It's horrific. Any war is horrific, but this one is just nonsensical, and it's just power-hungry violence of one person and sort of the elite that surrounds him. No one wants this war, no one needs this war, and no one could need a war, you know? So it's senseless, horrific violence which is happening in Ukraine, and it has to stop. I don't know personally anyone who supports this war or who even thinks that there is any reason behind it apart from just power hungriness of our government.
And do you think Putin cares about these sanctions? Because ultimately they're affecting the people living in Russia, aren't they? What do you think to that?
He didn't care in 2014. He's not caring now. I think it's a thing that for British people is really hard to understand, that Russia is basically a dictatorship with someone who does not care about people and people's lives and their sort of individual sacrifices. So it's all just fodder for his ambitions, I guess. So it's treating people like things, like they're expendable. So he doesn't care that the inflation is growing. He doesn't care that the ruble is falling, that the prices are going up, that people might be losing jobs. None of this matters to him. And I think it's also sort of Putin's power stances that he's just calling the West's bluff, where the West scares with sanctions, with troops, and then Putin just shows them, you see, you can't really do anything about me. And he shows the same to the people in Russia. So I feel that we just all need to unite and get him out. I don't know if I'll be able to return to Russia after I said this, but this is what I think. I don't think he cares. And that's why I think I definitely support sanctions, but I also think that maybe, I don't know anything about politics much, but maybe the world leaders could come up with the sanctions which would affect Putin in a way that scares him, or at least makes his life uncomfortable, because so far he's fine. It's other people who are suffering.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and you'll be marching on Sunday, I believe. So Thank you, Polina. Thank you for sharing with us.
And thank you to both of you for that. It's time now for a look at the sporting world. And sadly, the main story, Aidan, is Shane Warne.
Yeah, dreadful news. And one of those guys who's so formidable, as not just as a sporting competitor, but also as a personality throughout the 90s into the 2000s, even his post-cricket life as well. And you almost think that, is it possible this person could die? Of course, that sounds stupid, but
so suddenly and so young.
It was just I felt disbelief yesterday. I felt a bit of numbness yesterday. I'm not a mad cricket fan, but everyone knows who Shane Warne is. You remember that bravado coming out of Australia? He was one of those sporting stars, wasn't he, back in the late 80s, early 90s, who came out of Australia. You can see him there in those pictures for the benefit of those on radio, wearing the jacket. He wore that green and yellow jacket with pride as well with Australia. And you remember Pat Cash in tennis, you remember Pat Rafter, David Campese in rugby, Mark Bosnich in football, all these guys coming out of Australia, making themselves known to a global audience in sporting terms and transcending their sport as well, as has been said for most of the last 24 hours. And he really was something else. You remember, you touched on it in the last hour, the white sun cream.
You always had the white sun cream, the zinc cream.
Yeah, he sometimes used to wear the hat as well.
And it sort of made him look like a warrior.
Yeah, exactly.
As well.
He had the surf dude look.
Yeah.
But he also was one of these guys like who'd come out. He looked like he'd come out of the pub to face the English, you know, and he flew in the face of English imperialism, especially with cricket, with its colonial past and everything. And the rivalry between the two countries intensified over that period. But for all the ribbing he used to take, and he gave as good as he got,
Yes,
believe
he
me.
did, yeah.
But for all the ribbing he took, I believe strongly, and I would maintain today, that English fans never begrudged the fact that this was a person of immense talent.
Oh no, I mean they hated the fact if they were up against him, but they knew. That the reason for that was because he was so good.
So good, yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, people of a certain generation remember ritual batting collapses by what we thought was a useless English team back in the 90s. I'd go to school in the morning, Mum would be driving me, and there'd be more news of another batting collapse by England, and it was because the likes of Shane Warne and that golden generation of Australian players, Ricky Ponting, Steve Waugh, Glenn McGrath, they were the nemesis of that England side. And I think that the best tribute you can pay in some ways, not necessarily the best tribute, but it's an interesting perspective that 20 years on, having at the time thought that that England side with Mike Atherton and others was absolutely useless in the face of that Australian onslaught, you actually realise they probably actually weren't that bad. They were up against absolute greatness, because it was only when that golden generation passed on that you realise that there are Australian cricketers who are beatable. And then the Ashes that followed since 2005, it's been a much more even contest, notwithstanding the one that happened just before Christmas, of course.
Well, look, we've been looking backwards. How about looking forwards to 2028?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's talk that the UK and Ireland could actually win the Euros, the hosting of the Euros, unopposed. Turkey was going to be a competitor, but they've gone through the process in 2016 and 2024. They don't want to be beaten again. It looks like an international humiliation for them. And in the face of a UK bid, I think that their bid would probably look a little bit inferior by comparison. Three big stadiums in Turkey: Besiktas, Galatasaray, another one as well, El Fenerbahce as well, which would host it. But I think that in a massive country like that, it doesn't really lend itself to tournament football. I think the UK and Ireland would be a good hybrid solution for UEFA, because they want, having lost so much money in the last couple of years with the pandemic, they want to go to an established market where they can garner profits quite quickly. Now, what last summer did, holding it in a few different venues around Europe for the first time in a long time now, they were very reluctant to do that, because in Euro 2000 and World Cup 2002, so that's Holland and Belgium, followed 2 years later by Japan and Korea, the split country solution didn't really work. There were problems across time zones. They didn't make the money they should have made. The football wasn't good, so that didn't really help either. The players were playing in sweltering conditions in some areas of the country, of these regions, and I think that they've been reticent ever since to go back to having it across different cities.
It's interesting because some pundits say that that's the way the Olympics is going to go in the future. It's going to have lots of different destinations, not just one.
Possibly. I mean, I'll tell you why that might happen, Anne, is because you can prepare a technically excellent bid, but if you miss out in 4 years' time and you've got stiff competition from, say, somewhere in the States in 4 years' time, well, you know, you could be looking at, even if your bid is very well prepared, you might be looking at 20 years down the line. So maybe the solution is to broaden it out a little bit. But in football didn't have a good experience of this in 2000 and 2002. Last summer, when by necessity we were forced to have it across Europe, obviously England bizarrely went to Rome to play their quarter-final against Ukraine. But it worked. It did work, and it was proof that it can be done. And there's no doubt that if you come here, just as we were talking about last week, holding the Champions League final at Wembley, you make a stack of money.
Yeah.
And that is what UEFA
it's always about the money.
particularly in these straitened times.
It did. Oh, look, Aidan, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on, and we'll bring you the very latest on the situation in Ukraine in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Russia's military will observe a ceasefire in 2 parts of Ukraine to allow civilians to evacuate.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Saturday, March the 5th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK. We're on your TV, on your radio and online.
Coming up this morning, the Russian Defence Ministry claim they've agreed the evacuation routes with opposition forces. Ukraine's Security Council had called on Russia to allow civilians to escape the fighting.
Ukraine's president condemns NATO leaders for ruling out a no-fly zone over his country. But do you agree with Volodymyr Zelensky?
Who would want to wake up to that sound? Well, in Kiev they have this morning more air raid sirens on what is now the 10th day of fighting.
Well, the humanitarian crisis is worsening, and our reporter Paul Hawkins is on the Polish border today.
Yeah, good morning. It's snowing here. It's very cold, but the Ukrainian refugees continue to stream across the border. Coming up, we'll be speaking to a Ukrainian mum from Kiev who's had to make that long journey to the border.
And meanwhile, the cricket world is in mourning after the passing of one of the greatest cricketers of all time, Shane Warne.
He was, of course, a hero to many, but you've also been letting us know your sporting heroes this morning, and past or present, it's good to get your views on that this morning, as it is about anything you want to talk about, including, of course, the situation in Ukraine. gbviews@gbnews.uk is our email address, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
Well, officials from the Ukraine's City Council of Mariupol say civilians are allowed to leave at 11 a.m. local time following a Russian ceasefire. Humanitarian corridors are expected to stay open for around 5 hours. It's not very long, is it? A Russian defense spokesperson said Ukraine has agreed to those terms.
Today, March the 5th, from 10 a.m. Moscow time, the Russian side declares a ceasefire and the opening of humanitarian corridors to allow civilians to leave Mariupol and Volnovakha. Humanitarian corridors and exit routes have been agreed upon with the Ukrainian side.
Sorry, I was going to say 5 hours isn't very long to be told you've got to get out now.
It's not, is it? No. And how safe would you feel actually doing that? Would you trust the Russians to have that ceasefire? Don't know if I would. Elsewhere in the last hour, we've had reports of multiple explosions in the city of Kharkiv, and footage shows a large explosion in Irpin near Kiev as Russian forces fight their way through the suburb to reach the capital.
Well, let's go back to the ongoing refugee crisis, because apparently over 1 million refugees have fled Ukraine into nearby countries since those Russian forces first invaded. The UN Security Council apparently is going to meet on Monday as Ukrainian leaders are urging for the safe transit of aid.
Well, in Poland alone, more than 650,000 civilians are said to have entered the country over the last 10 days. Paul Hawkins is on one of those border crossing points for us now. What's the latest, Paul?
Yeah, good morning, Stephen. Morning, Anne. We've been with you all morning here at the Dorohusk border. Earlier on, not many people here, but as you can see, more and more people are now coming to the border. If I just show you over here, more and more cars here pulling up on the Polish side here where we are to collect Ukrainian refugees that are coming across. And then if we pan around over here, this is the Ukrainian side. This is where people are coming through in a variety of vehicles. And then if I just look behind me, you can see more and more people are here now to collect Ukrainian friends, family that are coming across the border, or indeed they may even be here for humanitarian purposes. That mobile home in the background, that's just pulled up and it's giving out what looks like tinned food. And actually, I think on the floor they've even got pet food there. So they're even looking out for the animals that are coming across the border, fleeing the war in Ukraine. Over here, there's a sign there that says transport to help people on their way. If we come over here, the Catholic charity Caritas is here as well. Just want to show you some of the food that they've prepared for people that are coming across the border. We've got some. Let's have a look in here. We've got some tea in there. There's some tea in there, and this is coffee. Is that right? In here? Cocoa. Cocoa. Right, there you go. There's some cocoa in there, and then I know that in here they've got a variety of soups. There's some pasta in there. There you go. So they're ready here for so many people coming across the border. Of course, the UN reckons 4 million refugees in total. Let me just move the chair out of the way for our cameraman Jim. 4 million refugees in total who will eventually cross the border. That is, of course, an estimate. We'll walk here, make our way here around another TV crew that are here. Of course, a lot of media trying to cover the unfolding crisis. Another stall here that's giving away food. And if we come in here, this is an area that's providing a bit of warmth for the refugees. We can speak now to, mind out of the way there, Jim. Oksana is with us, a mother of one boy who's come here from Kiev. Oksana, thank you for speaking to us on GB News. Just tell us, why did you have to make the crossing? Why did you leave Ukraine?
Because in Ukraine situation it's horrible. There is war, really war. Russian soldiers, shooters at hospitals. They killing our children, our women. Please help us stop this war. Please, please close the sky for us. Please, all people, I ask you, help us, please.
How long have you been travelling to the border?
2 days.
2 days.
But we stay at night, two nights.
Yeah, and you've arrived here with your little boy who's here.
My little son.
Yeah, your son's here. There he is. Yeah, what does he make of what is happening in the country?
I told him what happened because над нашими головами.
Because of the bombs.
On the sky, we saw many many helicopters, and we hear bombs. Yes, so I must understand. I must tell my.
What does he say?
He, like a child, he understands, but not all. Not all understand.
And you've travelled to the border and you've left your boyfriend in Ukraine to fight. That must have been very difficult.
My boyfriend, my mother there because my grandmother can't stay. Can't walk in, okay? Right. And my brother now soldier.
So is he okay? Have you heard from him?
Excuse me.
Have you spoken to him? Is he okay?
Yes, he okay. He's okay now. Yes.
He's okay. And you're here now with your little boy. Where will you go?
I have two brothers. One of my brother in Poland living and working. I came to my brother.
Yeah. So you will find work here.
I hope I find work. Yes.
Yeah. And for how long?
I don't know. I hope this terrible situation stop as soon as possible.
Yeah. When
I pray for this, for all people who stay there. Many people have not eat, have not water, have not electricity, gas. it's terrible situation. Please help us. Close sky for us, please.
Yeah, you're talking about you want the West to fly jets over Ukraine to keep Ukrainians safe. Yeah, the West say they can't do that because then they will fight Russia.
Yes, but you don't understand that Russian tomorrow can go, for example, to Poland, to another country. Putin is crazy.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to us, Oksana. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. And safe journey to Poland. Okay, thank you. So many people like Oksana that are coming across the border, all with a very similar message. They want more help. They want air cover from Western governments. And they want us to do more in the West when it comes to protecting the Ukrainian people and ultimately, as they say, protecting ourselves.
OK, look, Paul, thank you. Thank you for that.
I can understand her frustration, can't you?
But, you know, this is... And we forget when we see things on our TV screens or when we hear things on the radio, sometimes you get a disconnect, don't you, between what is really going on. And, I mean, you will have heard it in Oksana's voice, and if you're watching on the TV, you will have seen it in her face, the absolute fear and desperation and the tiredness. She was so drained.
Yeah.
What
it was really heartbreaking.
To be.
And when she said, you know, please give us air cover, and Paul said, but we can't at the moment, because that would mean that we would be directly fighting Russian forces. And she said, yes, but you don't understand. They could then move into Poland. To which the only answer is, yes, but we could then. I mean, this must be so frustrating. We could, but it would still cause what could cause an utterly devastating nuclear war. That's what we're all frightened of. But to see it actually happening to her and her family, her little boy there, is absolutely heartbreaking.
Terrible.
Well,
you know, it's just awful.
I know, it's beyond belief. You want to thump the table and walk out and yell at somebody, don't you? Well, we're joined now by Baroness Catherine Mayer, who is the UK's first ever trade envoy to Ukraine. A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. And I know, I mean, officially you're the trade envoy to Ukraine. Goodness only knows how your job is affected. But I know you feel very emotionally caught up in this as well, because you know people in Ukraine.
Absolutely. And also, I have Russian blood, and like most Russian, I have also Ukrainian blood. And my grandfather was fighting against the Germans in Limburg, which is now Lviv. And the family then fled the Bolsheviks. So I have a lot, and this is probably even as a child when I became a conservative, because I know what a dictatorial regime is like. And what I'm seeing now, I mean, I don't think anybody can look at any of those pictures without wanting to cry. I mean, it's devastating, barbaric. And Putin, what he's doing, he's going back to what the Soviet Union was. He closed all the borders. Now people in Russia can't leave. They're scared. They're arrested. I mean, we've all seen also pictures of people who dare demonstrate, and their children being taken to prison. And then this unprovoked barbaric war. I mean, it's, you know, you can't just watch the pictures and not feel like crying for the population of Ukraine, also crying for the kindness of the Poles. I mean, how many people they are accepting. It's fantastic. And Zelensky, a hero, who is still standing there and willing his people to fight on. And we can only hope that the Russian army will be demoralized.
I know it's difficult, but I mean, if we look at how we got to this point, has there been, I mean, do you see, because you've got a sort of fairly unique perspective, really, has there been a failing of the West to, A, protect Ukraine, and B, to engage sufficiently with Russia?
Well, I think, you know, one can always go back and say if, but I think the main mistake of the West is that we were all becoming quite selfish, self-involved, and we tend to judge our enemies on the same basis as we judge ourselves. And Putin is another character. And I don't think anybody, I mean, I also was the first one. And in fact, in the debate last week, I said so. I never actually imagined that Putin would have done what he's done. I think that a lot of people realized that he wanted, to increase a little bit his Donbass area possession, but an invasion of a neutral country, and in that scale, was in the 21st century was unimaginable, even for Putin. But I think Putin, if we look at his face on television, and if we hear what's going on, I mean, there are two theories. One says that he's got cancer, we know he's got a very bad backache, but he's on a lot of medicine. He's been living in a bubble for the past 2 years because he's terrified of either catching COVID from other people or because he's terrified of a coup. And I think the man has become insane. I mean, to do what he's doing is insane. And yes, we can go back and yes, we can analyze what he has said in the past. He has constantly said that he wants to recreate the might of Russia, but I think we still didn't believe it. And that's a tragedy.
Are you, I know you have a great many friends, I think the ambassador's family. Are you in touch with anybody in Ukraine or even in Russia at the moment? Yes. What are they saying?
I have a friend of mine who is a French journalist. He is in Moscow, and we're very close to the ambassador and his wife and his children. And it's just devastating to see them because they feel it's so personal. I mean, for instance, we know a cabinet maker who's become a friend, and he's Ukrainian, but his brother is in Kiev. His first cousin is in the Russian army, because like most Russians and Ukrainians, it used to be it's the same blood. It's like Germany. You suddenly have East Germany and West Germany, and it's the same people, but divided by a different regime. And here we have a barbarian dictator who wants to take over a whole country because he can't stand the idea that they want to be democratic, that they want it to look West, and that they had the free press and the freedom to express themselves. He can't bear that.
We're sitting back as NATO countries in many respects, Lady Catherine. I mean, obviously, we're doing what we can, but we are restricted at the moment. There is this concern now. We're talking to someone, a former sort of NATO planner earlier on, who said, look, these humanitarian corridors that are being opened up sound good, but history tells us that once people have been moved through, it then opens the door, if you like, for Putin to send in terrible weapons, to flatten cities like Kiev. Yeah. What should we do? Can we prevent that? Because that would devastate Ukraine for decades.
I think the problem is we're in an impossible situation. There are no solutions. I mean, we've tried the diplomatic route ages ago, and it didn't work. And it didn't work because Putin will not stop. He wants to take over Ukraine. And the Ukrainians, quite rightly, do not want to be taken over by Russia. And so there is no solution. The only hope, in my opinion, that we can have is that the Russian army becomes so disillusioned that some army officer, some general, probably comes in and tries to do something to convince Putin to stop this nightmare. But I don't see, the problem with, as we're talking about, coming into the war, we can't fight against the Russian might at the moment. And we don't want to start World War III, because I have no idea, but my instinct is, and I'm sure you have talked to people who know much more what's happening in real life in Russia, I sort of get the feeling that Putin is now in a corner. There's no way for him to get out of the situation. So for him, it's life or death. And so that means that he would be capable of pressing the button. And if he presses the button, we can say goodbye to London. So this is a really, really dangerous situation. And it is particularly dangerous because now we have like an animal who is in a corner. I mean, he's capable of anything. And you see what he does in Russia, putting children who dare demonstrate peacefully for peace, to put young children in a prison. I mean, can you imagine? So how do you deal with a man like that?
Ultimately, I suppose we all believed in the power of diplomacy, and you've always lived in the diplomatic world, and you know a lot of diplomats. I mean, you must be terribly demoralised by the fact that diplomacy is getting us nowhere.
Very much so, and I think diplomacy also works, and that's where maybe the failure of the West is, that we have demilitarized ourselves, and it can only work with the threat of action. But Putin knew very well. I mean, Germany has no army. We are basically probably the strongest in Europe, but on our own, we can't do anything. The Americans are basically got less and less involved with Europe. Politically, we all had our problems. And so he decided this is the right moment to attack and to leave his legacy. Because if he's dying of cancer, he's probably thinking, what am I going to do for people to remember me in history? Well, the poor man thought that he was going to come in and take over Ukraine in 3 days. And that didn't work, thanks to the amazing resolve of the Ukrainian people. So it's not as easy as he thinks. And that's why I think there is still maybe some hope that somewhere people around him are going to say enough. And then when you think about the middle class and even the oligarchs who are still in Russia, I mean, they can't take their money out. The stock market is collapsing. Inflation is rising. I mean, somewhere along the line, we can only hope that somebody is going to do something and stop him. But from outside, I don't know what we can do unless start a World War III, but we can't do that. So it has to be from the inside. You know, where is Mossad? Where is the American intelligence? I mean, somebody needs to get in there.
Well,
yes, they do.
There will be something going on. What did you say? The US intelligence, Mossad and many others surely are gathering intelligence at the minute. Lady Catherine, it's really good to talk to you,
yes,
to get your
so
personal
much.
perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, yes indeed. Coming up, we're going to be looking at the protests going on in Glasgow that will show support for Ukraine and for the refugees leaving the country.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 9:24. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio, and online. Let's just show you the picture of the Polish border at the moment, should we? Where more people are gathering.
Yeah, and as we've been seeing all morning, very heartrending pictures because they're ordinary families who have probably, in some cases, as we heard earlier, travelled to the border for 2 days. It's taken them to get across a very cold and wintry Ukraine from wherever they are, to leave their houses and flats behind, to leave their living behind.
And to leave their loved ones behind.
Yes, to leave their men behind.
Because, as you see, mainly women and children, because if you're a male aged between 18 and 60, then you're turned round, you're sent back, you have to join the fighting force in
18,
Ukraine.
did you say?
18, yeah. Children.
I always imagine myself in a situation like that, and I suppose we all do, don't we? We think, what would I do? I'd be taking my 4 little boys to the border, and maybe my 2 oldest ones would be told to go back. Can you imagine how devastating
Awful.
that is?
And but to see these people getting on with it, getting over the border, and just seeing what happens next, it is absolutely heartbreaking.
For those of you who are listening on the radio as well, what we're looking at is ordinary people in anoraks, as you would be in the same situation, bobble hats to keep you warm, wrapped up in clothes. In some cases, the children, who have often got their little wheelie suitcases with them, volunteers have walked up to them and put blankets around them. We saw one in a Mickey Mouse blanket earlier, didn't we? Children who are looking really perplexed, bewildered, and being cared for by their mums with them. We can see at the moment one of those braziers burning, and people huddling around it for warmth, warming their hands there. This is the most appalling situation, but thank goodness Poland is welcoming them in, and the rest of the world seems to be saying so as well. We've had so many stories of people raising money and making donations that are hopefully getting to them on those border crossings.
And it's a case of, the UK has said it will welcome people in on 3-year visas who have got relatives or family or friends in the UK. And it's a case of, well, when will anyone want to come here? Because at the moment, they're wanting to stay close to Ukraine, aren't they? In the hope that they can get back soon, that this is over soon and they can return. Whether that's going to be possible or not is anyone's guess.
And I suppose if you do have, and we've heard already again this morning from many Ukrainians living in this country, if you're fleeing the Ukraine at the moment, you might think that probably one of the safest places to go is to go and stay with relatives. So we will have Ukrainian families wanting to come here, won't we?
And let's hope we should make them welcome. Alan's been in touch. Morning, Alan. Says, I'm ashamed to have not done enough to help the Ukrainian people. We've done a lot, but not enough to be proud.
Bill says, it's the 21st century and we're all watching the systematic destruction of a people. It's a worldwide disgrace.
And Graham says, watching that poor young woman with her 4-year-old son is heart-wrenching. It's time to stand up and do what needs to be done. Well,
Philip says we should grab all of the Russian money and use it to fund the rebuilding of Ukraine. That would be sweet justice.
Well, there's something quite appealing about that, Philip, I have to say. A lot of people wanting to do what they can, and sometimes that just means having your voice heard. There are protests happening across the UK today, and in Glasgow, hundreds of Ukrainians are expected to march in protest against the war in Ukraine. And actually, it won't just be Ukrainians, it'll be others joining that as well. Our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, is in St George's Square. And Davy, this is going to be quite a day, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, and they're already getting set up here in George Square in Glasgow. The barriers are in place, and they're getting set up. We've got a Ukrainian sign, a Ukrainian flag, and one of the cenotaphs here, so...
I think we've lost sound.
OK, apologies for that. We'll get that sorted out. But we know there are people going to be gathering in Market Square, in Nottingham, in George's Square there, in Glasgow, and many other places up and down the country. And I know a lot of people are donating to a lot of charities, sending goods and supplies out to, well, we can't really get them in Ukraine at the moment, or it's very difficult to, but certainly getting them to those border areas, so people doing what they can, and we need to.
Well, Clive says if you do not put up a defence against the aggressor will always win. You cannot fight against bullets with placards. No, but you can make your... I mean, that's, I think, the point, where in free countries, free democratic countries, you have the right to protest and have your voice heard. And that's what the protesters, for instance, in Glasgow, Nottingham, elsewhere, that's what they're doing, and that's important too.
I mean, Paul says, how can we have Russia remain in the UN when they invade another country with no justification? It's a very good point. I mean, the problem with the UN not doing a great deal at the moment is that Russia has a veto.
And who allowed that?
Well, maybe it's time to scrap
changes.
all vetoes on that, and as someone messaged earlier on, just have a sort of majority vote. John says, who's going to pay for the clean-up in Ukraine? And as Philip said,
to clean up.
you know, we should take the Russian money and do it. But, I mean, it might be a case of, and the fear is now, that Putin may want to just literally flatten
lay it to waste.
The cities.
Yeah. Meanwhile, a lot of people are watching from all over the world and all over the country, and it's lovely to hear from you. Mark and Gay are sitting back watching us in Sydney, in Australia.
Oh.
Yeah,
Robert's
very nice.
in a chilly Costa Blanca. I don't know what... chilly.
Is it chilly in the Costa Blanca?
Probably down to about 20.
Mike is drinking tea and watching us in Brighton, breezy Bridlington.
Oh, Bridlington's lovely. Wendy's in Hoylake in Wirral. Can you give a shout-out for a lovely beach, which we're trying to save after the council ceased clearing it 3 years ago? Yeah, we can.
Oh, well done you. That's another example of somebody actually getting up and doing something. Maureen and David are watching us in Chesterfield in Derbyshire.
Christine's in Adelaide in South Australia.
Hi there, Australia. Keith is in Denmark watching us, and Janet and Ray are in the south of France. That sounds very nice indeed.
I've got to say a quick hello to Gary in Blackpool, because I love Blackpool. My in-laws are in Blackpool. And Karen's watching us from a static caravan. Has been building his home for 3 years and will move in soon.
And what about Lindsay and daughter Anya in Oswaldtwistle in Lancashire?
Now,
I'd like to hear a sat-nav say that.
Oswaldtwistle.
Oswaldtwistle.
I've never heard it. I mean, I know that part of the world very well. I've not heard of Oswaldtwistle before.
You have now. Very important.
I'm going to have to look it up on the map, see how nice it is. Keep your thoughts, your point of view on everything we're covering today. Some of the stuff you're saying about Ukraine and about Russia actually is important. It is important, and you bring up some ideas and some perspectives that we haven't thought of, so it's really good to get your thoughts through.
Well, up next, we're going to be joined by the Scottish Labour leader, Anna Sarwar, so stay with us.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 9:33. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Al, and we've got the sort of usual treat we have at this time of the day on a Saturday, because we have Aidan McGee with all your sport, and we have Stephanie Tetchy with all your showbiz. Morning, both.
And as we so often comment, the worlds collide.
Yeah, and this week it's been quite evident.
Yes, it really has.
How much the worlds do collide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is interesting. We're going to kick off actually with sport, because Chelsea Football Club is up for sale by Russian owner Roman Abramovich. It's received several offers, we understand, yet to see anything formally considered by the club so far.
Well, to look at how this sale is impacting both the club and the fans, we are joined by former Chelsea striker Tony Cascarino, and it's lovely to speak to you. Good morning.
Good morning, Anne, Stephen.
How are things? How are you feeling about what's happened recently?
Well, it's been obviously a very difficult period for the club. They've had an owner that's been hugely successful, that now is willing to write off all loans and sell the club and move it on. I'm way more optimistic, Anne, about the future of Chelsea than pessimistic, because the bottom line is the infrastructure of the football club is brilliantly worked. You know, they've been a club that's been hugely successful over a period of time. If you talk about the academy, if you talk about the women's team, if you talk about the youth system, and they've had an incredibly gifted squad. I think there's lots of optimism, and Chelsea won't be sold on the cheap. You know, this is a very viable club. This is not a Newcastle where they have to reinvest into a football team. They've never been a selling club. They've been a club that always, you could probably say, well, apart from Eden Hazard, which they sold for 120 million, I think they're a club with great future. I think the infrastructure that was put in place, certainly from Roman Abramovich, to the structure of Chelsea, to be successful and continue to be successful.
Aidan McGee is here, our sports correspondent. I'm sure he's got one or two things he'd love to ask you.
Tony, an old friend of mine. Good to see you again, Tony. I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that the club is a very attractive proposition financially. Is it attractive enough to get a deal done as quickly as Roman Abramovich would like?
Well, Aidan, as you know, I mean, look, it's rare that a club of, you know, at the top standing of the Premier League where becomes available. We're led to believe that there has been offers and bids made before that wasn't enough. I think the fact that he's prepared to write off all the loans makes it more attractive. Look, they get 42,000 capacity, which is a slight hindrance because of the money that you can draw from supporters and attendances. Look, it's like PSG. PSG only have a capacity of 47,000 in Paris. They do not get the same revenue as what we get from TV in England. So, you know, 435 million was generated by Chelsea, which has risen enormously in the last few years. And obviously you can probably play devil's advocate because of the players' wages has been driven up as well. Will they have an owner that will be prepared to bankroll the club like Roman did? I still think, if anyone's thinking of buying Chelsea, do you really believe that they were going to come into a club with a huge success rate and then go, well, no, we're going to be careful, we're going to be more prudent? I think a new owner, if they're prepared to buy Chelsea, know that they're going to be ambitious and very aggressive in the way they do their business. And you'd expect that from a club like Chelsea now.
So you're optimistic about the future, that's it, basically, yes?
Yeah. Yes, look, it's been a very few... obviously, there's a sports side to this and the political stance, which is, you know, we all understand what's been going on behind the scenes. And, you know, look, the UK government allowed him to come to this country. And Roman passed a fit and proper owner sort of perspective from what the Premier League demand. It's been very tricky, but I do believe he's prepared to walk away and try and leave Chelsea. And one thing I would like to say on this is, if Roman is doing the right thing in selling the club, would he prepare to sell to the right person? I believe he would. Someone who's going to be a good owner for this football club, because that's what Chelsea need again.
Tony, it's been really good to talk to you. I'm sorry we're out of time, but thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, we're sort of back to the world of politics suddenly.
We do. It is all interchangeable, but we need to get the view of Anna Sarwar now, who's the Scottish Labour leader and MSP for Glasgow, who joins us. Look, it's really good to talk to you. Look, in terms of the Westminster government response to this, are you satisfied with what is happening so far?
Look, I think it's important to recognise that we are making progress, but there is still more that we can do. So I welcome the sanctions that have been put in place so far. I welcome the fact that we are sending humanitarian assistance. I'm pleased we're starting to see progress in the free flow of refugees to the UK, but I still think there is more that we can do to support, one, those that are fleeing tyranny, but also more I think we can do in terms of humanitarian assistance. And I think there are still some more steps we can take to put even more financial pressure on Vladimir Putin and his associates. And so let's see this as a watershed moment. Let's make sure we're flushing out Russian state money from the UK, from the wider world, from our politics. Let's take the urgent action to address Russian disinformation, and let's stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people. But progress made, yes, in terms of the actions we're taking, but actually on the ground, Ukrainians are still suffering, so there's still lots more we need to do.
There's concern, isn't there, about the possibility of any emergency legislation against oligarchs in the UK. I mean, it's all well and good, but that emergency legislation would have to be withdrawn when this is over, wouldn't it?
Well, I think that if we need the emergency legislation to clamp down on the oligarchs, then let's do it. But let's make it retrospective as well, so we can understand they've already got their tentacles into our economy and into our politics. So how we push that out, I think, is really, really important. But longer term, I'm not sure why we need to amend it later. I think it depends on what we're saying here. We're not saying for a second that genuine Russian citizens who might have a very different view of the world, a very different view of Russia than Vladimir Putin does. Of course, we want to work with them. But we've got to isolate Vladimir Putin. We've got to isolate those who are close to Vladimir Putin. And we've got to isolate those who have stolen money from the Russian people in order to invest it and cleanse it here in the UK. That simply shouldn't be happening.
You say we've got to do more, and the point is, what now? Increase sanctions? We seem to be doing all we can do, don't we?
I think that's the big challenge, isn't it? Is what more can we do? I think there are more economic sanctions we can do. For example, I heard this morning that PayPal is stopping its use in Russia. I think we should be doing all the other economic channels and forms of accounting that people use internationally for them to be withdrawn from Russia. I think there's more we can still do in terms of those who have Russian influence and Russian money, both here and abroad. We need to isolate Vladimir Putin within his own country. We need to isolate Vladimir Putin from people who might have thought that was a comfortable place to be if you wanted a future or an economic future with Russia. So we have to isolate that, and I think we can do that a lot more. And then what more we can do to support the Ukrainian people, both in terms of humanitarian assistance, but also in terms of defensive equipment. So we can support, yes, those that are fleeing their homeland, but also support those that are staying in their homeland to try and defend it.
Look, can I ask you about internal Labour Party politics? I mean, it's for the Westminster side of things, really, but it's the Labour Party as a whole. The newest MP, Britain's newest MP, is Paulette Hamilton after that Birmingham-Erdington by-election win yesterday. And as we reported a couple of days ago, she did attend this sort of bullet or ballot meeting. I think it was back in 2015 or thereabouts, where she, in effect, we've got video of her doing it, called for an uprising against the government. I mean, it's disturbing to watch that video back. Does that need to be addressed? We can't just forget those pretty inflammatory comments that she made, can we?
Well, Jane, I don't know which video you're referring to or which comments you're referring to, but if you're talking about NATO, I'd say I'm not really sure which comments or video you're referring to. I've not seen anything like that. But NATO we're a proud member of NATO. NATO is an alliance for peace, not alliance for war. And what we need to do to build peace around the world is really, really important. And that means defending democracy. It means standing up to tyrants like Vladimir Putin.
Okay,
and it means recognising that we have a responsibility to the world.
Forgive me, Anna Sarwar, for jumping in. You talk about defending democracy, and just to put this into context for you, Paulette Hamilton was talking about, the possibility of an uprising against the government, the UK government. These were comments she made back in 2015. Now she's a member of Parliament. Now, that doesn't sit well, does it? Especially when we're in such difficult times.
When you refer to an uprising, I mean, what do you mean by that? I mean, if there's a political uprising where we're saying, let's have a government that changes this country, then absolutely I want us to have a government that changes this country. That, for a second, doesn't mean that we should talk about violence or talk about hatred.
Well, no,
I've talked a lot at this conference I'm at today and yesterday, that we can't have a politics about anger and division. It's going to be a politics about changing our country.
Forgive me, she was at a meeting called The Bullet or the Ballot.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. That sounds like a horrific title for any meeting. There is never an answer in the bullet. The answer is always in the ballot, and that kind of language or tone is frankly unacceptable. But I honestly don't know the meeting you refer to. I've not seen the clip. I've not heard the words. I want us to have a peaceful democracy, rooted in peace, rooted in changing our country, and any politics of anger or division or hate, regardless of whether it's with my own political party or any other political party, I will call out and not stand for. We've got to do politics differently.
Anna Sarwar, Scottish Labour leader, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, as the conflict in Ukraine rages on, many people across the world have been protesting in solidarity against the war. Polina Makulova is from Moscow and has lived in Leeds for more than 6 years. She blames Russian President Vladimir Putin for Russians being punished for his actions. Our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley has the story.
I'm here with Polina. She's Russian. She was born in Moscow and she came to Leeds 6 years ago to study at the university. She's strongly opposed to the war in Ukraine at the moment, and she's been on a march to stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Polina, can you just tell me, what do you think to this current war at the moment?
It's horrific. Any war is horrific, but this one is just nonsensical, and it's just power-hungry violence of one person and sort of the elite that surrounds him. No one wants this war, no one needs this war, and no one could need a war, So it's senseless, horrific violence which is happening in Ukraine, and it has to stop. I don't know personally anyone who supports this war or who even thinks that there is any reason behind it apart from just power hungriness of our government.
And do you think Putin cares about these sanctions? Because ultimately they're affecting the people living in Russia, aren't they? What do you think to that?
He didn't care in 2014. He's not caring now. I think it's a thing that for British people is really hard to understand, that Russia is basically a dictatorship with someone who does not care about people and people's lives and their sort of individual sacrifices. So it's all just fodder for his ambitions, I guess. So it's treating people like things, like they're expendable. So he doesn't care that the inflation is growing. He doesn't care that the ruble is falling, that the prices are going up, that people might be losing jobs. None of this matters to him. And I think it's also sort of Putin's power stances that he's just calling the West's bluff, where the West scares with sanctions, with troops, and then Putin just shows them, you see, you can't really do anything about me. And he shows the same to the people in Russia. So I feel that we just all need to unite and get him out. I don't know if I'll be able to return to Russia after I said this, but this is what I think. I don't think he cares. And that's why I think I definitely support sanctions, but I also think that maybe, I don't know anything about politics much, but maybe the world leaders could come up with the sanctions which would affect Putin in a way that scares him, or at least makes his life uncomfortable, because so far he's fine. It's other people who are suffering.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and you'll be marching on Sunday, I believe. So thank you, Paulina. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you. Yes, there are going to be lots of protests and marches going on all around the country this weekend.
Yeah, and that's how those voices are heard. In the meantime, let's catch up with all the latest sport and showbiz for you this morning. We were talking, Shane Warne, with Aidan throughout the course of the morning, but I just want to bring in Stephanie Tetchy on Shane Warne, because he wasn't just a sports legend, was
he, in his own right, he became a celebrity. You know, he broke many grounds, including when it came to cosmetic surgery and hair transplants.
Did he really have cosmetic surgery?
He did have cosmetic surgery. Like Botox, a bit of here and there. Yeah, it was. If you study his face over the years, it was quite changing. But kudos to him, because he was quite vocal about it. He says, look, I do TV, I'm losing my hair, I want my hair to be looking good. So he was one of the first male stars to come out and say, I've actually been for a hair transplant. And I think he was the one that sent the precedence for other male stars like Wayne Rooney, sports stars, to go ahead and get it done.
I didn't know that, because I still see him as the young guy with the sort of peroxide quiff.
Well, actually, 2003...
That's why it fell out.
He was conscious of his body image from a very young age. I mean, back to 2003, he actually missed the World Cup that year, the Cricket World Cup that year, because he said that he failed a drugs test, but he said it was actually down to taking slimming pills.
And, you know, in some of his final tweets, he was talking about how he was trying to shred so he could look how he did like 5 years ago. So you can tell that he was still pretty active, you know, so that's why his death has been quite a shock for us all. But in terms of the celebrity thing, we can't deny he had the women as well. He had the creme de la creme.
For a long time.
Yeah, him and Liz Hurley were together for 3 years. They were engaged. And, you know, he said when he was with her, that was some of the happiest times of his life. She's yet to comment, so I can understand it's probably quite been devastating news for her.
I mean, he was known as a party lad.
He was, and he didn't try to hide it. It was just part and parcel of who he was, you know, and that's how sports stars have been for many years.
The Sun's front page was good. I smoked, I drank, old.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Summed him up quite nicely.
Yeah, is that the sort of... Was that his priority?
Yeah.
But, you know, a character.
Front page of the Star, though, they simply call him the greatest.
Yeah.
Was he really the greatest cricketer?
I think he was the greatest spinner, in terms of that kind of bowling. You have to remember as well that
what's a leg spinner?
A leg spinner is someone who you're trying to get the ball down low, below the kneecap, basically, to try and make it difficult for the batsman to scoop the ball away. So there's different types of spinning. He was a leg spinner. And you have to remember, Anne, as well, that the game, when he first came into the test scene in the early 90s, spinning was kind of being edged out a little bit, I would suggest. It was all about the televisual fast bowling. That's what everyone wanted to see, the Great West Indies fast bowl, the pace attack, as they call it, the fast deliveries, you know, just going down by the feet of the batsman, not giving him any chance whatsoever. And that's what lended itself to the new sort of the televisual era that cricket was moving into, along with other sports as well. And he came along and, you know, flicking the ball around between both hands, rotating, or alternating rather, staring out the batsman.
That was intimidating.
Yeah, it was the theatre, it was the psychology. It was the psychology, and he was into that. And obviously, when you deliver a spin bowl like that, it really is beautiful to watch. We think of the ball of the century in 1993 at Old Trafford. The guy called Stephen Baker, one of our production staff, was actually at that match in '93 at Old Trafford. And it was in the early years of Jumbotron technology at grounds, where you could actually see things a second time. Now, the first time we saw the delivery in real time, it looked as if it had hit a divot or a stone or something, because it literally it was going out wide and then changed direction on the bounce and then clipped the top of the stump. And Mike Gatting, no mean player, former England captain, was out. And at first you thought that's a bit of a freak. And then they saw it again on the Jumbotron. Don't forget, English fans at this stage had no time for Australia. We were well into that era where we were being ritually beaten by this great generation of players. And then it turned direction. The crowd, when they saw it on the replay, just gasped, and you saw Mike Gatting leaving leaving the pitch, he was defeated, he was bamboozled, and that was the arrival of Shane Warne that day.
Bamboozled.
Wow.
Talking about people who'll be bamboozled. Sorry, I was thinking, what do we all think of Paul McCartney headlining
my gosh.
at Glastonbury at the age of
80? So he's going to turn 80 in June, but the week after he turns 80, he'll be going to Worthy Farm in Somerset to headline Glastonbury. It's a bit of a controversial pick. Obviously, the Beatles have so many fans, but people are like, has he lost his spark? Like, is he really going to headline it? But
Can he still sing?
Yeah, oh, no.
Well, some people.
Well, technology, yeah.
Does it matter?
No.
Probably not.
No, I don't think
Probably
it
not.
matters. And
But it's a bit like seeing the Stones, though. I thought, when
Yeah.
are you going to retire?
No, I think people just want to hear the music they love, the soundtrack to their youth, as they say.
Well,
but, you know, it'll be interesting. I think we need that variety sometimes on music stages because we get all, like, the youngsters and they're coming with their stuff. So sometimes you need to give credit where it's due. So I, for one, will be at the front when Paul's on stage.
Will you? You're going to go?
Obviously, yes. I've been waiting 2 years for Glastonbury.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Been before?
Yeah.
I can't imagine you in a tent.
I actually
Gotta be honest.
No, it was so bad. I had to have like 11-year-old and a 10-year-old help me set up my tent. I was like, yeah, I can do it, and they came over and to help. So yeah, it was really bad.
Dear, well, that's something we can look forward to with you at Glastonbury. Look, Stephanie, Aidan, thank you both very much indeed. Let's just have a look at some of the views, the many views that you've sent in this morning.
Loads, and sporting heroes and all the rest of it.
Sporting heroes. John says Ayrton Senna was and always will be my sporting hero. And Dee says Johnny Wilkinson, cool, calm and collected under pressure, especially that drop goal in 2000.
But I tell you what, it's been brilliant to be with you today and hear from you, whether you're in Chile, Costa Blanca, or Sydney, Australia, watching us having a nice cup of tea, or Mike's drinking tea and watching us in bright and breezy Bridlington. It's been wonderful to hear from you.
Oh, yeah, always is. And we'll be talking about how to get, we'll be talking hot water bottles.
I'm going to bring in 2 hot water bottles at least for us tomorrow.
Oh, yes, please.
Well, for me and Anne.
Sandra says she's got the key to how to get the bed nice and warm just before you get in it.
Yeah.
I keep a hairdryer plugged in next to the bed to warm it up for about 30 seconds before I get in.
Be careful.
Yeah,
that's all I'd
I was
say.
thinking.
Oh, yeah, but if it's just a quick blast before you get in.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet that's lovely and warm when you...
That brings you back to the days of warming pans. Do you remember warming
warming pans?
Yeah. Brilliant.
I don't remember that personally.
I stayed in a very old country house hotel once where they had warming pans. You know, they put hot coals in and then swoosh it around the bed. And then you get in it and it's just toasty warm.
Oh,
that sounds nice.
That could be the way forward.
I think you have to have servants to do it for you.
Yeah, you do, clearly.
Well, look, that is it from us today. Thank you for joining us. And we've got plenty more, of course, coming up for you here on GB News. It's the Saturday selection, but we'll be back with the very latest on the situation in Ukraine and everything else that's going on in the world.
Yeah, we'll see you
from 6 o'clock tomorrow.
Bye.
Good morning. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weekend promises quite a bit of sunshine for many of us, but a fairly dull and damp, dismal day across eastern England today. Mostly thanks to this rather stubborn weather front that's been with us for a number of days. But high pressure is building in elsewhere. It's led to a pretty cold start with a frost for Scotland, Northern Ireland. But equally, plenty of sunshine to come here through the day. Just 1 or 2 scattered showers across the far north. That weather front, though, making for a dull, dismal, damp day from parts of Yorkshire down to East Anglia and the southeast, maybe at times also affecting the East Midlands. The West Midlands westwards, however,